Bleach. Studying medicine can't save the spirit world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 801 Complete Holy Body Sealing. It was incomparably fast. When Cheng-ge instinctively sensed the danger and raised his head, it was a terrifying speed that was countless times faster than the previous God Spear. The blank white light that burst out when the God Spear stretched out made Cheng-ge not even have time to react, and the God Spear pierced directly into Cheng-ge's left eye. Dang! As the broken lens mixed with blood splashed out of the eye socket, Cheng-ge was blown away like a piece of rag. This time, Cheng-ge's figure flew backwards for several kilometers, almost reaching the limit of Ichimura-jin's naked eye vision, and the extended God Spear blade and Cheng-ge stopped. The next moment, the exaggerated blade of the God Spear that spanned several kilometers disappeared instantly. However, after losing the support of the God Spear that penetrated deep into the eye socket, Cheng-ge's body did not have the tendency to fall down at all, but instead stepped forward heavily. Cheng-ge suddenly raised his head. His left eye had completely turned into a hollow bloody hole, and his right eye was full of bloodshot and angry, staring at Ichimura-jin at the end of his sight, roaring. Damn and despicable god of death, do you think that this level of sneak attack can kill me? Don't think that you can defeat me who has been given the holy word I steal by breaking through the fragility of skin and eyeballs. Compared to those fragile body parts, my bones are the real steel. At this moment, Cheng-ge seemed like an angry devil. Even while roaring, he walked towards Ichimura-jin step by step. God of death, you have no chance to defeat me, and death is your only destination. Facing Cheng-ge's oppressive momentum, the smile on Ichimura-jin's face did not change at all, but the smile became faintly stronger, and he spoke. I'm sorry, but I'm not being mean. A poisonous snake will bite only when it is absolutely sure. You have already exposed your ability of the holy word in the jingling court. Is it possible that you were my prey from the beginning? The only thing that was a little unexpected was that Captain Rokush was too confident and careless, and suffered a terrible blow. Ichimura-jin's words made Cheng-ge's momentum stagnate. What? You said I was your prey? However, before Cheng-ge finished speaking, Ichimura-jin's fake smile on his face turned into a real and terrifying killing intent, and he whispered softly. The most terrifying ability of the god-killing gun has never been speed and penetration, but Ichimura-jin slightly opened his eyes and pronounced. Shoot him, god-killing gun. The next moment, before Cheng-ge realized the problem, something suddenly exploded in Cheng-ge's empty left eye socket. It was not an explosion, but a more terrifying dissolution. Cheng-ge's head, shoulders, and even the part above the chest almost completely dissolved and disappeared in an instant. I steal Cheng-ge, die. From the beginning to the end, Ichimura-jin only made two moves, one to save the life of Rokuguru Meikensei, and the other to kill the enemy Cheng-ge who had been eyeing him for a long time. In the wartime command center of the Seireitei, the holy text abilities of the Holy Cross Knights, such as Cheng-ge, who had already made moves, had already been analyzed and studied professionally countless times. However, Rokuguru Meikensei firmly believed that his fists could defeat the so-called steel defensor. Ichimura-jin judged that he was the best candidate to quickly get rid of this difficult enemy, and had been lurking around the battlefield in secret looking for a chance to kill with one blow. And Cheng-ge's death seemed to have opened the prelude to the disadvantages of the members of the Holy Cross Knights. Just like the previous raid of the Invisible Empire on the Seireitei, the advantages of Star Chapter and unequal intelligence gave the Invisible Empire a great advantage in an instant. This time, each captain seemed to have found the enemy inadvertently, and they all had their own confidence and preparation. Following Cheng-ge, most of the other members of the Holy Cross Knights who were fighting were at a disadvantage. The death of Cheng-ge also made the members of the Holy Cross Knights aware of the crisis. In an instant, almost all the members of the Holy Cross Knights who were fighting chose to complete the liberation of the holy body. The visions produced when the complete holy body was liberated shone in different areas of the Invisible Empire. However, this scene reflected in the eyes of Kurosaki Mairi was exchanged for a ruthless laugh. Hectares, you really don't learn your lesson. At this time, Kurosaki Mairi took out a sealed bottle from the strange and white golden robe, and crushed the bottle in his palm with his 5 fingers. For a time, a large number of special transformation spirit particles that could not be directly observed by the naked eye spread in Kurosaki Mairi's palm. When Senju Cheng, who was walking on the giant tree, turned his eyes, those special transformation spirit particles instantly dispersed to every corner of the Invisible Empire. As the members of the Holy Cross Knights entered the complete holy body, they had to constantly absorb the spirit particles around them, and those special transformation spirit particles were inevitably absorbed. Suddenly, the originally stable perfect body state was like a piece of quicklime dropped into a pool of clear water, instantly destroying the balance and forcing the members of the Holy Cross Knights to exit the perfect body state. Damn it, why can't we maintain the perfect body again? This is not the Seireitei, this is within your Majesty's invisible empire. How can we, the Holy Cross Knights, not be able to maintain the perfect body? What on earth did those death gods do? Amid the angry roars of the Holy Cross Knights from different directions of the invisible empire, Unohana-Retsu and Senju Cheng-ge were still walking towards the direction of Jinja Castle at a leisurely pace. However, Kotetsuin and Yokiriza had already started to act, quickly heading towards the defeated road guru Makensei for emergency treatment. And the defeat and death of Soto was just the beginning. With the perfect body sealed, following Soto, Kachika Byakuya also defeated his opponent if fear is not. Senju Cheng-ge's seemingly gentle gaze was actually constantly observing the movements on various battlefields so that he could provide emergency medical care at any time. Compared with the last time when Byakuya Kachika faced the fear ability of Ace not in the Seireitei, his body was unable to move normally under the influence of fear and was helpless. This time, while Byakuya Kachika continued to endure and face the fear in his heart, the secret, one bite of 1,000 blades flower condensed by the endless cherry blossoms completely overwhelmed Ace Not. In the end, Byakuya Kachika looked down at the truly dead Ace Not with a look of pity and announced, "It seems that my capacity is greater than your fear." Chapter 802. No pain. Byakuya, you are still as narrow-minded as ever about certain things. Makoto Senju, who knew Byakuya Kachika's character well, listened to the sentence, even though he didn't know the specific process of the battle between Byakuya Kachika and Is Not in the Seireitei last time. However, the fact that Byakuya Kachika didn't forget to make the kind of declaration at the end was enough to show that Byakuya Kachika was probably in a very embarrassing situation last time. And with the defeat of another Holy Cross Knight, Unohana-Retsu and Makoto Senju, who were walking side by side, had already reached the middle of the giant tree extending from the sky, and were getting closer to the Silver Frame Castle. The battles that took place in the Invisible Empire could be seen clearly from a high position. The current situation has undoubtedly been further inclined towards the side of the God of Death. And the high-handed posture of Unohana-Retsu and Makoto Senju seemed to be looking down on the other Holy Cross Knights, aiming directly at Yathwatch, trying to force Yathwatch to show up. This scene undoubtedly angered many queens whose loyal to Yathwatch. Boom. Suddenly, the giant tree in front of Unohana-Retsu and Senju Makoto exploded from an unknown source, so that the giant tree that penetrated the Invisible Empire was visibly torn and broken. The next moment, Bambayata, who looked both cute and heroic, stood on the broken giant tree with a forked short saber in her hand and announced, "Don't be so arrogant, God of Death, do you want to treat the Holy Cross Knights as nothing?" However, as Bambayata's voice fell, a large number of green buds emerged from both ends of the broken giant tree that had been completely blown apart by her ability blast at the same time, and reconnected at a speed even more terrifying than super speed regeneration. This made Bambayata's expression freeze, and Senju Makoto's voice rang out. "It was not the giant tree that pierced the Invisible Empire, but my power. If you want to restore the dignity of the Invisible Empire with your own ability, then there is no point in blowing up that giant tree. The only way is to try to defeat me. That's what I meant." Bambayata raised the short saber in his hand and pointed it at Unohana-Retsu and Senju Makoto at the same time, shouting with a stern look, "Your Majesty's evaluation of the 5 special combat powers, let me, Bambayata, see for myself whether it is just a false name." Facing Bambayata's challenge, Unohana-Retsu and Senju Makoto smiled at the same time, and put their palms on the handles of their zanpakutō. Then, Unohana-Retsu and Senju Makoto looked at each other, revealing a tattooed inquiry. "Let me do it." Then, Senju Makoto took the initiative to speak. The last time the students of the Shino Academy of Spiritual Arts were attacked, it was probably the Queen's ability of the Holy Words. As the vice-captain of the 1st Division, I neglected the defense of the Shino Academy of Spiritual Arts, which was an undeniable mistake. Now is the perfect time to personally avenge my juniors. Unohana-Retsu tilted his head slightly and said elegantly, "Makoto, being ruthless to such a cute girl may damage your image as a gentleman in the eyes of many women in the GOTY 13. Otherwise, however, before Unohana-Retsu finished speaking, Senju Makoto's figure had disappeared from the spot. In Bambaita's eyes, she could only barely see the moment when Senju Cheng drew his sword and approached her at an incredible speed. So fast. In that split second, Bambaita could not see the specific trajectory of Senju Cheng's sword. As a user of the Holy Word's ability Critical Attack, Bambaita's hands glowed with a certain azure light and suddenly blasted forward. Blast into pieces, God of Death. Super explosion. Suddenly, everything in front of Bambaita seemed to have some kind of violent reaction, and a shocking explosion with a raging breath of destruction broke out. The rolling waves of fire were even more in-shaped and spread in all directions in the air. At that moment, Bambaita clearly saw the trajectory of Senju Cheng, which was completely covered by the super explosion. Ha ha ha, this is underestimating me. Just as Bambaita's triumphant laughter just echoed in the air, it stopped abruptly. The zanpakutō pierced through Bambaita's heart accurately. The next moment, Senju Cheng's figure emerged from the explosion of fire, and his unscathed posture shocked Bambaita and made her despair. How is it possible? Facing Bambaita's doubts, Senju Cheng lowered his eyes slightly, with a gentle and warm smile on his face, and gently comforted her. Don't worry, it's okay. As a doctor, I will give you the last bit of tenderness. You won't feel any pain. Just take a deep breath and leave the rest to me. However, before Bambaita could react, a burst of unimaginable extreme pain completely overwhelmed Bambaita's consciousness, dragging her consciousness into eternal darkness. Liar, I didn't have time to breathe, and it hurts. However, Senju Cheng looked at Bambaita, who was already dead with shock still on her face, and a hint of satisfaction flashed in his eyes for his precise skills. According to Bambaita's expression, it can be seen that it was very successful. I believe that Bambaita would not give a bad review of herself even if she went to hell. The only pity is that Bambaita can't specifically say what is worthy of praise now, so Senju Cheng can't do it even if he wants to improve it in a targeted way. As Senju Cheng drew the knife from Bambaita's chest and shook off the blood, and then returned it to the sheath, Unohana also walked to Senju Cheng's side without haste. Senju Cheng did not forget to defend himself and said, Teacher Unohana, it seems that you have misunderstood something. I have always believed in the concept of equality between men and women, and I will treat women with great respect and choose to go all out for my opponents. In response, Unohana focused on the trajectory of Senju Cheng's sword just now, and praised him. Makao, your swordsmanship is improved again. This is the credit of teacher Unohana. With daily sparring, there will definitely be some improvement. Senju Cheng continued towards the silver frame castle with Unohana smiling and saying that there was no anxiety or tension in the battlefield, as if he was walking in his own back garden. However, Senju Cheng killed Bambaita so neatly and was still approaching the ice palace step by step. This made the expressions of the members of the Divine Pardon Guard, who were guarding the bedroom and observing the battlefields from afar, slightly change. A mere death god, your arrogance is really intolerable, Gerard Valkyria, who used the holy word ability miracle, said with an unhappy look on his face. If it weren't for His Majesty's order not to leave the palace while guarding it, I could kill all the death gods by myself. Chapter 803. Moths to Flame. That's not necessarily true, Gerard. The holy word lethal dose. Yasking Naklaval made a somewhat funny pose, flipped his finger at the long bangs hanging on his face, and said, Senju Cheng is one of the Special Combat Forces. He has forced His Majesty into a certain crisis before. We may not be his opponent. Only a guy like you who was temporarily included in the God's Pardon Guard would be so unconfident. My strength is not at the same level as that of ordinary Holy Cross Knights. Those so-called captains don't even have the qualifications to stand in front of me. The more Gerard spoke, the more indignant and excited his expression became. He even subconsciously raised his feet and wanted to go in the direction of Senju Cheng. At this moment, through all things leisurely Barrow, who had been leaning against the wall, raised his head slightly and said in a calm tone, Gerald, don't be impulsive. All actions must be based on His Majesty's orders. Guarding the palace is our mission. Standing at the edge, his whole body was covered by a white cloak and his face could not be seen clearly. Enforcement Penedit Packager also nodded faintly, and then made a faint sound that was difficult to hear. What is Penedit saying? Gerard asked. Uchihabara listened for a while, and then relayed Penedit's meaning and said, He thinks this is probably a trick of the enemy. After luring us away, they secretly attacked the palace in order to destroy His Majesty's important sleep and prevent His Majesty from recovering his true strength. Penedit nodded again. However, Gerard said with an expression that he was taking me as an idiot. Who are you kidding, Uchibaron? Penida's brain capacity does not support him to speak such a long paragraph. Penida. Although Penida's face could not be seen clearly, Yaskin could see that Penida's movement seemed a little excited. Uchibara said calmly. That's what Penida meant. I just added a few details. It must be more than one. When Gerard was quite sure about continuing to say something, the 4 members of the God's Guard suddenly all took a fighting stance and aimed at the entrance of the Ice Palace. The next moment, Aiden Sosok walked out of the entrance without haste. Aiden Sosok. What is your purpose in coming here? Uchibara asked sharply. However, Aiden Sosok, who looked indifferent and arrogant, looked directly past Uchibara and looked at the door of the bedroom, and Haswad, who was still leaning against the door and seemed to be sleeping with his eyes closed. I don't need to talk to you. As soon as Aiden Sosok said this, without waiting for Uchibara to react, Gerard, who was also a member of the God's Guard, rushed towards Aiden Sosok in a few big steps. The next moment, Gerard had a short sword with a V-shaped guard and a black double-edged sword in his hand, and then he raised it high and chopped it down at Aizen Sosok. Aizen, who do you think you were talking to? Just at the moment when Gerard and Aizen Sosok crossed each other's bodies, Aizen Sosok seemed to have no action, but Gerard's chest suddenly spurted out a pool of blood, and he fell down with a confused expression. Huh? Did an ant just fly over? Sorry, if I accidentally stepped on you, please forgive me, because you were too small. It is really difficult for me to pay attention to your existence all the time. Aiden Sosok's eyes were still looking forward calmly, and he said in a calm tone. Immediately, Legiri Barrow, Yaskin, and Penida all took fighting postures. Aizen, are you going to be an enemy of His Majesty? Legiri Barrow scolded and confirmed. What a naive statement that makes people laugh. The death of a moth flying into a flame, should the flame be blamed for being too hot? Aiden Sosok asked back. But behind Aiden Sosok, Gerard, who had already fallen, stood up almost as if nothing had happened, and said angrily. Hey, I'm not dead yet. Aiden Sosok's eyes slightly tilted to one side, commenting. It seems that vitality is more commendable than strength. And this condescending tone almost made Gerard almost explode with anger, and he was about to burst out with amazing spiritual pressure unconsciously. Enough. Haswad's scolding sounded questioning. Gerald, are you going to disturb His Majesty's rest? Gerard's angry face froze, and the spiritual pressure on his body almost instinctively dropped. Only the angry and unhappy eyes were still staring at Aiden Sosok. In response, Aiden Sosok completely ignored Gerard's existence, and even walked through the Divine Pardon Guards as if taking a walk, and walked in front of Haskvald. Facing Aiden Sosok's approach, Haskvald slowly stood up, looked at Aiden Sosok, and said, Sir Aiden, you may need to explain your behavior this time. Aiden Sosok's eyes casually glanced at the Shirai standing next to Haskvald, and then spoke. Shouldn't it be what you needs to explain? If not resisting is also a means of resistance, then perhaps the so-called covenant needs to be reconsidered. Haskvald's eyes were still calm, and he said, The little harassment from the Gotti 13 is not enough to disturb His Majesty. Aiden Sosok asked back. A so-called half-body, is his speech so ridiculous? Then how are you going to deal with the approach of Makautao-kun? I'm also curious about this. At this moment, a warm and unfamiliar voice broke into everyone's ears. At the entrance of the Ice Palace, the figures of Senju Makautao, Yuna Retsu and Kuroseki Ichigo appeared in everyone's eyes. Excuse me, how are you going to deal with me? Senju Makautao slowly drew out his zanpakutō, and with the area under his feet as the center, he instantly changed the terrain into a grassland emitting vitality. When? Aren't Senju Makautao and Yuna Retsu still halfway to go? How can it be so fast? What about Waso? His holy text ability Wuyuzi can't stop the god of death. Facing the queensies in front of him who were shocked, Senju Makautao asked back with some doubts. Who stipulated that I must walk here step by step? Of course I will arrive here while your attention is distracted. After a pause, looking at the many invisible queensies who were mocked as idiots and looked unhappy, Senju Makautao added, As for the deformed kid with 2 tongues, I have of course performed a corrective surgery on him. Chapter 804. The zanpakutō. Gerard heard this and spoke subconsciously. How could it be? Well, Shu's ability can make all visible and invisible damage automatically avoid him. Theoretically, nothing can hurt him at all. At this moment, not only the God's Pardon Guards looked shocked and puzzled, but even Kuroseki Ichigo standing behind Senju Makautao also showed a puzzled look. Even though Kurosaki Ichigo has been trying various ways to attack Wisha, the ability of W twists and turns is so strange that it will automatically avoid attacks that he has not seen or sensed. However, at the moment when Senju Cheng seemed to have made a move, Kurosaki Ichigo had not even reacted yet, and Wisha suddenly fell to the ground and died. It seems that as companions, you don't quite understand each other's abilities, Senju Cheng said with some surprise. The range of attacks that Wasu's ability can avoid does not depend on perception, but probably belongs to the category of instinct. For example, Wasu's instinct will feel that Kurosaki Ichigo's zanpakutō can attack him, so even attacks that he cannot perceive cannot cause him any harm. And with Wasu's knowledge, there are countless attacks in the world that exceed his instinctive cognition. Of course, although Senju Cheng said it lightly, in fact, Wasu's ability W twists and turns can be called a foul. It can be interpreted as that as long as Wasu thinks that something will hurt him, he will automatically avoid Wasu. However, perhaps when facing the god of death, Wasu, as a quincy, instinctively believes that spirit particles will not hurt him. Therefore, before Senju Cheng killed Bambayata, he had secretly manipulated the microscopic spirit particle sword composed of spirit particles to quietly integrate into Wasu's blood vessels through the mouth and other places. What happened next was easy for Senju Cheng, the most professional doctor, to manipulate those spirit knives and artificially cause acute myocardial infarction in Wasu's body. Moreover, Wasu might have relied too much on his W-U's ability, so that his physical strength was the worst among the Holy Cross Knights, and he was even inferior to some ordinary vice-captain-level death gods. In this way, Wasu, not to mention withstanding the damage caused by those spirit knives in his body, died before he could even call for help. After a pause, Senju Cheng's eyes slowly swept over the members of the God's Pardon Guards, Aiden Sosuk, Haswad, and Ishirai in front of him, and then stopped at the door of the palace behind them, and said, "So, you are just hiding behind that door. If you have no objection, I will go in. If you have any objection, I am very curious about how you plan to stop me." As Senju Cheng's voice fell, a terrifying spiritual pressure that was as terrifying as the collapse of the sky and the cracking of the earth rose from Senju Cheng's body. Although it should have been an invisible spiritual pressure, it caused visible cracks on the pillars, walls, ceilings, etc. around the ice palace that could not withstand the impact. The next moment, when the countless green grass behind Senju Cheng expanded wildly and turned into giant trees, a wooden giant Buddha that instantly broke through the ceiling of the ice palace appeared. Bankai Morigami Buddha boom boom boom. Compared to the shock and fear of the invisible empire, the other death gods who were fighting with the Holy Cross Knights in various places stared at the giant Buddha, and their eyes could not help but reveal reverence. "Master Senju, it's time to take action." Has Master Senju arrived at the ice palace? Then I have to quickly deal with the opponent to support Master Senju and Captain Unohana. No matter how many times I have seen it, the mere appearance of that huge thing that seems to be enough to suppress everything is still shocking. And after the supergiant wooden Buddha was formed, a giant palm that was enough to cover the entire ice palace slammed down. The shadow that formed in an instant was like a large dark cloud that instantly enveloped everyone. Don't even think about it. Arrogant. Woo, stop it, Death God. Suddenly, almost all members of the God's Pardon Guard subconsciously took action to stop Senju Cheng. Gerard's huge body, like a muscle monster, rushed towards Senju Cheng, and the double-edged sword in his hand shone with the light of spirit particles, aiming directly at Senju Cheng. Obviously, even a reckless person like Gerard knew that it was impossible to compete with the huge wooden giant Buddha that almost occupied more than half of the invisible empire space with brute force. Only by defeating Senju Cheng, who was manipulating the wooden giant Buddha, could this behavior of disturbing His Majesty's rest be stopped. However, before Gerard could get close to Senju Cheng, a dazzling crescent cross charge completely blocked Gerard's way forward. Ichigo Kurosaki, holding the double-bladed moon-cutting swords, met Gerard without hesitation. At the moment when Gerard almost attracted most of the attention, Seireitei had a giant sniper rifle in his hand, aiming at Senju Cheng. Pull the trigger. Everything is connected. An ultra-dense spirit particle bullet was released at an astonishing speed, heading straight for the center of Senju Cheng's eyebrows. However, Unohana Retsu, who seemed to be strolling elegantly and leisurely, was actually always keenly observing all the changes around him. At the moment when the sniper rifle in Seireitei's hand was aimed at Senju Cheng, Unohana Retsu had already drawn his sword and blocked the path of the bullet. The zanpakutō was swung out. The blade of the zanpakutō blocked the trajectory of the spirit bullet at an angle that could be called exquisite to the peak. This is also the most labor-saving angle that directly changes the trajectory of the spirit bullet. However, Unohanaretsu's eyes suddenly shrank. In common sense, the hardness and tensity of the zanpakutō itself are also closely related to the spiritual pressure of the god of death itself. Therefore, a strong man of the level of Asian Sosok can easily break the zanpakutō of the vice-captain level or even the ordinary captain. However, if it is the zanpakutō in the hands of Yamamoto Shinigami Shibukuni and Unohanaretsu, there is almost no possibility of being cut off or damaged. However, the scene reflected in Unohanaretsu's eyes at this moment was that the blade in his hand that was trying to block the spirit particle bullet had a small hole in it, and the spirit particle bullet was still heading straight for Senju Makoto without stopping. Makoto. Be careful. Unohanaretsu's heart tightened and he exclaimed instinctively. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 805. The unreconcilable weight. That guy's ability is likely to penetrate everything. This thought appeared in Unohanaretsu's mind, but he had no time to speak it out. He could only shout instinctively and turned his head to look behind him. The spirit bullet also approached Senju Makoto in an instant, without giving Unohanaretsu more chances to react. Moreover, this scene also exceeded Senju Makoto's expectations. In common sense, with Unohanaretsu's strength, it is impossible for him to resist a mere long-range attack. Therefore, Senju Makoto's pupils shrank slightly, and Senju Makoto, who had no time to react, could only instinctively turn his head to the side. Bang! The spirit bullet crossed with Senju Makoto, bringing a trace of blood. Even the ultimate spirit body could not resist the ability called penetration of all things. However, leisurely Barrow looked at Senju Makoto, whose temple was scratched with a line of blood, and a trace of disappointment flashed in his eyes. His ability All Things Penetrate can penetrate everything on that forward trap between the muzzle and the target, and finally easily penetrate the designated target. Therefore, before the other party knew the ability information, this was also one of the best ways for leisurely Barrow to judge and kill Senju Cheng, who might pose a threat to his majesty. Now, the best opportunity that could be found in a hurry was finally dodged by the other party. Regret. However, this can only be regarded as a regrettable result for leisurely Barrow. The blood that slid from Senju Cheng's temple was dazzling in the eyes of Unohana. Unohana slowly turned his head back, and the originally squinting eyes opened a crack, revealing a murderous intent like a sea of corpses and blood. Under the shocking killing intent, Yasukin, who was originally planning to attack Senju Cheng, instinctively stopped. The subconscious was telling Yasukin that if he continued to approach Senju Cheng, the woman in front of him who exuded a terrifying killing intent would probably cause fatal injuries to himself. While the three members of the Divine Pardon Guards were trying to stop Senju Cheng's attack, the wooden giant palm that covered the entire ice palace was about to cover it. Penida, who had not yet made a move, uttered some strange and weak syllables, and the white cloak on his body trembled as if he was ready to make a move. Aswad's figure instantly appeared above the ice palace. The elegant and slender figure had a simple Western-style spirit sword in his hand, stabbing at the wooden giant palm in the sky that was countless times larger than Aswad. At this moment, from a distance, Aswad was like a mantis rushing towards the wheel, and the next moment he would be completely beaten into a meat paste by the wooden giant palm. However, the moment the spirit sword and the wooden giant palm came into contact. World harmony. In an instant, Senju Cheng, who had established a connection with the wooden giant Buddha, vaguely saw a scale appear behind Aswad and quickly tilted to one side. In contrast, the reality was that the wooden giant palm that was originally enough to easily smash the ice palace, and even the entire wooden giant Buddha became faintly fragile. Bang! The next moment, the wooden giant palm was actually easily cut in half by the spirit sword in Aswad's hand, and it slammed heavily on both sides outside the ice palace and the silver frame city below. Then, Aswad gracefully flew into the air and landed again to guard the door of the bedroom. This scene also made the expressions of the members of the God's Pardon Guard obviously relaxed. Otherwise, if they disturbed His Majesty's sleep, it would undoubtedly be a felony that was difficult to forgive. However, Aswad's originally calm expression on the ground changed slightly, and the scale behind him that was originally tilted to one side suddenly tilted to the other side. It was also at this moment that the body of the wooden giant Buddha, which looked like it had changed, returned to normal again, and the severed wooden giant palm was also instantly generated. For a moment, Haswad, who had never shown any special expression even when the Invisible Empire encountered an unprecedented attack, now looked at Qianzhou with a little more shock in his eyes. What kind of weight is this? The ability of the holy text Be World Harmony is to change the misfortune and luck of both parties. However, what is the real misfortune and luck in this world is the weight of name. This is like the purchasing power of currency. The same unit of currency is weakened and changed by Be World Harmony. Even if it is still a unit of currency, its purchasing power is reduced by several times compared to the normal state. Be World Harmony is undoubtedly an ability to directly weaken the essence of the enemy from a certain dimension. However, after Haswad activated the ability of Be World Harmony, it only lasted for a moment and then passively recovered. It seems that my capacity is not something you can easily change, Haswad. Senju Cheng, who also noticed the changes in himself, said to Haswad, and the Buddha wheel composed of countless wooden giant hands behind the wooden giant Buddha seemed to turn. Countless wooden giant hands began to point to the direction of the ice palace, and Senju Cheng said, "How much weight can your ability bear without collapsing? I'm curious." Haswad's eyes flickered slightly, and he clenched the Lingzi sword in his hand again, and answered calmly, "Be loyal to His Majesty." Bang! Just as the countless wooden giant hands were about to start clapping, the door of the palace behind Haswad suddenly opened. Yuha Bark, wearing a black cloak, appeared behind that door, exuding amazing power. The appearance of Yuha Bark also caused the battlefield that was about to break out to pause for a moment. Yuha seemed to ignore the existence of Makoto Senju, Unohana Retsu and Ichigo Kurosaki, and instead scolded Haswad in a deep voice. "Too noisy, Haswad." Haswad quickly knelt on one knee in front of Yuha, bowed his head, and said respectfully, "Please punish me, Your Majesty." Facing Haswad's pleas for punishment, Yuha ignored Haswad, who was half kneeling on the ground, and walked past him, looking in the direction of Makoto Senju and others, standing with his hands behind his back, and spoke. "Death God, I haven't attacked Soul Society yet, and you actually came to me on your own initiative." However, although Yuha's posture, expression, and tone were flawless, both Makoto Senju and Aizen Sosok noticed the anger that Yuha deliberately concealed. Chapter 806. Lord Qianzhou, do you want to ride? For Yuha, who was born blind and speechless, as long as he stops absorbing souls, he will gradually return to the state of the living dead. That is, a state more frightening than death, similar to the state of the Soul King, who is now cut into a human stick to serve as a wedge. And Yuha's power also comes from the souls that are constantly absorbed. The holy separation of most of the queensies, including Kurosaki Masaki and Katajiri Hyu, and the recovery of all the mixed blood queensies' power, was the beginning of Yuha's real recovery of power. Then, the war launched in the Seireitei 5 days ago, the killing and death caused, was also to collect more souls for Yuha himself, and then he could further restore his strength. Sleep is a process of quickly restoring strength for Yuha. However, this process was abruptly interrupted. This is undoubtedly a very bad state for Yuha. Because for Yuha, the time nodes of these few days are relative to the process of expanding his own container. The smoother the container is expanded, the better. Then when you actively recycle all the holy words, you can easily carry more power. Unlike the lowly existence of the half-blood queency, which is regarded as nourishment by Yuha, the stern-crossed knights, who were each given the holy words, are like fruits that grow vigorously. The more fruits are recovered, the sweeter the juice called omniscience and omnipotence that Yuha can awaken will be, and the more perfect it will be without any flaws. You can't wait to be buried on the eve of the world being ruled by me, Yuha said in a deep voice. Haswad, Ishidari and the God's Pardon guards also quickly retreated behind Yuha. Only Aizen Sosok did not move, as if he was going to further measure whether Yuha had the ability to be an ally, and he had no intention of directly standing up for Yuha. However, even so, the apparent combat power of Yuha's side is undoubtedly overwhelming in front of Senju Makoto, Unohana Retsu and Kurosaki Ichigo. In response to this, Senju Makoto's face seemed to be a little more serious, but his tone was still calm. Numbers cannot determine everything. Really? Senju Makoto, even if you use the little trick to temporarily restrict the perfect body, it is meaningless. As Yuha spoke, the spiritual pressure and momentum that burst out of his body far exceeded that of 5 days ago, and even obviously suppressed Senju Makoto. the world will fall into my hands. This is a future that has long been destined. Everything you do will only accelerate it. Senju Cheng, perhaps you who have mastered the King's Seal can make your zanpakutō exert power beyond the limits of the God of Death, but I only need to contain you, and then my God's pardon guards will be enough to kill all the Gotti 13 divisions. By then, without the obstruction of the Gotti 13 divisions, the Soul King Palace will be just a piece of cake. At this point, Itachi's bearded mouth slightly grinned, revealing a playful smile. It seems that I should be grateful for your plan, which brought the Gotti 13, which could have resisted for a while, to me. Senju Cheng asked back. Are you so confident in your subordinates? Of course. Itachi replied. What a coincidence. Senju Cheng suddenly laughed and said, I'm also very confident in my companions. As long as I can contain you, my companions will definitely be able to wipe out the Holy Cross Knights and completely wipe out the Invisible Empire. Just relying on Unohana Retsu and Kurosaki Ichigo? Itachi said sarcastically. Of course not, as Senju Cheng's voice fell, a conspicuous back Mayuri Kuroshiro wearing a strange golden outfit appeared from the passage behind Senju Cheng. I shouldn't be late, Master Senju. I'm so sorry, I just looked for a long time and finally found the little cutie who punched me not long ago, and then I took this little cutie back. When Mayuri Kurosachi appeared in front of everyone, Itachi and others found that Mayuri Kurosachi was sitting on the back of the Holy Wodo, mass-killing Dorisk Belshi. At this moment, Belshi, who had always been tyrannical and arrogant, had a stiff and dull expression, and his skin color was also abnormally gray. He lay on the ground like a dog. This scene made Itachi's face darken, and the eyes of several members of the God's Pardon Guards were even more obviously murderous. Even though the Stern-Crossed Knights were also full of contradictions, and mutual attacks occasionally occurred. But no matter what, Belshi was considered a member of the Stern-Crossed Knights. Now, this lowly god of death in front of them was riding Belshi on his back like a pet, which was undoubtedly an insult to the entire Stern-Crossed Knights. However, facing the killing intention of the Stern-Crossed Knights, Kurosachi completely ignored it, and instead spoke to Senju Cheng with great interest. Senju-sama, this Belshi's ability mass killing is quite interesting, and it implies the potential for continuous evolution, and it is very worth studying. Senju Cheng undoubtedly found it difficult to empathize with Kurosachi's interest in sharing. Regardless of the issue of research value, wouldn't it be awkward to ride on the back of a muscular man? If you want to ride, shouldn't you ride Mo? However, Kurosachi is undoubtedly not the type who is good at guessing people's hearts, and even snapped his fingers. Suddenly, two more people with ashen complexions, stiff and dull expressions followed in, namely Bambaita and Ace Knot. Obviously, the reason why Kurosachi arrived a little late just now is that he went to collect the bodies of the defeated Holy Cross Knights for transformation. TSK, the body of I. Steel Sota was also worth transforming into a puppet. It's all because Ichimura Jin went too far. Half of his body was melted away. He can't even be used. Kurosachi Mayuri muttered some dissatisfaction, which made people feel cold. Then he looked at Senju Cheng with white eyes and asked. Senju-sama, do you want to ride one too? I have retained most of the abilities of these puppets when they were alive. They will still be stable and comfortable to ride. Senju Cheng. Senju Cheng glanced at Bambaita, who was closest to him. I have to say that Bambaita is really beautiful. Even in this state, she still looks quite cute and beautiful. But, no thanks. Senju Cheng, who was full of righteousness, declined Kurosachi Mayuri's kindness without hesitation. Chapter 807. Together. After being rejected by Senju Cheng, Mayuri Kurosachi's expression was obviously a little disappointed. After all, as a qualified scientific researcher, Mayuri Kurosachi still respected and valued Senju Cheng, the big money investor. Therefore, he took the initiative to give Bambaita, one of the scientific research results, to Senju Cheng's amount, which was also a small return for Senju Cheng's investment in the past 2 years. If it were anyone else, even his nominal boss Unohana Retsu, Mayuri Kurosachi would never easily give away his important research results. Master Senju doesn't like those petite and slender puppets, does he like the Belshi I use? Thinking of this, Mayuri Kurosachi's heart was inevitably a little tangled. In addition to the fact that Mayuri Kurosachi deliberately retained Belshi's consciousness in order to repay Belshi's punch, he planned to repay the other party well. More importantly, from Mayuri Kurosachi's professional perspective, Belshi's ability mass killing has a much higher research value than Bambaita and Ace Knot. Therefore, giving Belshi, Such a valuable research material as a toy to Makoto Senju to use was undoubtedly a waste of resources in the eyes of Mayuri Kurosachi. However, if it was Master Senju, sharing would not be impossible. However, when Mayuri Kurosachi ignored Yufuch and the other queensies, and seriously struggled with whether to share with Makoto Senju, this series of actions was undoubtedly a strong provocation. However, before Yufuch was ready to deal with Mayuri Kurosachi himself, the figure of Seireitei appeared out of thin air beside Makoto Senju. Seirei's indifferent face, which seemed to be sad, slightly smiled, and did not speak. However, Makoto Senju understood what Seireitei meant, and also knew what he had done during his disappearance. Unlike other captains, Seirei's combat power was completely dependent on the number of spirit particles that were integrated. Therefore, after connecting with the space of the Invisible Empire, Seireitei immediately began to combine with the spirit particles in this space. Now, Seireitei Futaba can also take the initiative to show up in the Ice Palace, which is enough to show that Seireitei Futaba's ability has already covered the nearby area. At the moment Seireitei Futaba arrived, Shiguin Yorishi, who was incredibly fast, turned into a shadow and landed in front of Senju Makoto. Yuna Hanaretsu saw this and asked with a smile. Yorishi, why are you here? It seems that masculine has not been dealt with yet. That guy's ability is too troublesome. He has recovered inexplicably after suffering several fatal injuries. Shiguin Yorishi first hinted at his own advantages, and then continued. But Hirako Mako insisted that he personally deal with masculine, so I rushed over to support Makoto-kun as soon as possible. Yuna Hanaretsu reminded in a gentle voice. Is that so? Thank you for your hard work. You must be careful when you fight. Makoto may not be able to take care of you all the time. Don't worry, Captain Yuna, but you too. If you encounter any accidents, it will definitely affect Makoto's attention and may cause trouble. Shiguin Yorishi also spoke with a tone of concern for her superior. However, anyone can see that there is a kind of hidden confrontation between Yuna Hanaretsu and Shiguin Yorishi in their words. In this regard, Senju Makoto can only pretend that he doesn't understand it at all, and regards it as a loving concern between Yuna Hanaretsu and Shiguin Yorishi, and then turns to speak to Yuhabak. Yuhabak, now, how do you feel? Are you still absolutely sure that you can defeat us? When Yuhabak heard this, his expression did not change at all. He turned to look in the direction of Aizen Sasuke and spoke. Lord Aizen, what is your position? Aizen Sasuke still had his hands in his pockets and answered arrogantly. I only have Makoto in my eyes, and the rest are just ants. Then, Lord Aizen, join me in besieging Senju Makoto to win. Yufuch suggested. Aizen Sasuke said without being overly enthusiastic, but also vaguely showing his position. I will take action when necessary. This statement actually dispelled most of the doubts about Aizen Sasuke in Yufuch's heart. As Aizen Sasuke, whose ambition is no less than anyone present, if he is too active and takes the lead, it will make Yufuch doubt Aizen Sasuke's intentions. However, now Aizen Sasuke's attitude of sitting on the mountain and watching the tigers fight, with the obvious goal of seeking an opportunity to kill his old enemy Senju Makoto, has made Yufuch feel a lot more at ease. More importantly, in a dream he had fallen asleep in not long ago, Yuhabak saw himself standing in the Soul King Palace's Soul King's great inner palace. There were no members of the Holy Cross Knights beside him, but only the shadow of Aizen Sasuke was seen behind him. However, before Yuhabak could look at Aizen Sasuke more carefully, he was suddenly awakened by the astonishing spiritual pressure of Senju Makoto from the outside world. As for everything in the dream, Yuhabak, who was gradually awakening to omniscience and omnipotence, knew very well that it was a scene in the future that was bound to happen. It was also because of this that Yuhabak was somewhat puzzled that he would actually bring Aizen Sasuke into the Soul King's great inner palace. Could it be that his future self gave Aizen Sasuke great trust? Listening to the conversation between Yuhabak and Aizen Sasuke, Senju Makoto closed his palms in front of his chest, and the giant Buddha behind him, who seemed to suppress everything with his palms turned back, also closed his palms, and circles of Buddha wheels composed of wooden giant palms appeared behind him and began to rotate. Yuhabak, Aizen Sasuke, even if you come together, what do I, Senju Makoto, have to fear? At this moment, Senju Makoto seemed to have rarely shown his domineering and courage as the strongest fighter in the Seireitei, trying to fight against both Yuhabak and Aizen Sasuke, the two great enemies of Soul Society, at the same time with his own strength. Seeing this, Aizen Sasuke already understood what Senju Makoto meant. Go together. That means that close friends will fight side by side and kill Yuhabak, who has not yet fully awakened a certain ability, with the force of thunder. The only thing that made Aizen Sasuke a little regretful was that he had hypnotized all the Holy Cross Knights including Yubak with the ability of Mirror Flower Water Moon in the past few days, and sneaked into Yubak's bedroom. While Yubak remained asleep, he used the ability of Mirror Flower Water Moon to weave an illusion between sleep and the real world, trying to gain Yubak's trust. Now it seems that the effect is not as good as expected. Then, without changing his expression, Aizen Sasuke spoke as if he was stating something. "Watch, please, if you were against Makautao-kun, I will deliver a fatal blow at the right time." Chapter 808. Saintly. Aizen Sasuke's answer satisfied Yubak, and Yubak was also confident that he, who was destined to seize the world, had the ability to control the other party. Now, he only needed to ensure Aizen Sasuke's position in this way, so that Yubak would not worry about Aizen Sasuke's betrayal after seizing the world. Even with the combat power shown by Aizen Sasuke, Yubak also wanted to subdue Aizen Sasuke as his agent. Just like in the early days of the creation of the world, the Soul King held all the power, and Hyoshugu Ichiba acted as an agent to manage the world. With this thought, Yubak couldn't help but understand why Aizen Sasuke followed him into the Soul King's ouchi. The fate of the world, the arrangement of the world, I see, Yubak smiled and spoke. Although it is a good choice to take the lives of Senju Makautao and the 13th Gotti squad here, these ants destined to crawl on the ground cannot become an obstacle for the king to sit on the throne. On the contrary, these ants are far away from the throne, which will only make it easier for the king to get close to the throne. At the end of his words, Yubak pointed his finger to the sky and said, "Hastwood, the key." "Yes, Your Majesty." Hastwood, who had been half kneeling, responded and raised the double-edged sword in his hand high up, pointing it directly to the sky. In an instant, the tip of Hastwood's sword shot out several rays of light that rushed straight into the sky, and a pattern similar to a six-pointed star appeared under his feet, covering Yubak, Hastwood, Ishirai, the gods pardon gods, and Aizen Sasuke. The cloak on Yubak's body rustled, and his face showed a proud and confident look, as if he was looking down at Senju Makautao and others in front of him, and he spoke. "Senju Makautao, you death gods will stay in this world and fight to the death. After I ascend the throne, I will come back to deal with you. Don't even think about escaping." The moment Senju Makautao roared in a deep voice, countless wooden giant hands slapped the entire light column connecting the ice palace like crazy without blind spots. Yubak's voice came from those countless wooden giant hands. "It's useless. This is the key to the Soul King Palace that I prepared 1,000 years ago without telling the 13th Squad. The moment the passage was formed, this area was already part of the Soul King Palace. What a pity. You must have hit some illusion. The reason I want to destroy the Seireitei is that I think you Shinigami are a Naito. I don't have to completely annihilate you before I can create the king step by step." Goodbye, Senju Makautao. When all the wooden giant palms stopped attacking, Ithwatch and the others had completely disappeared. This scene did not make Unohana Retsu, Zaraki Fire, Shuin Yorishi and Kurosachi Mairi panic. Instead, they cast their eyes on Senju Makautao. Senju Makautao's face also had a hint of smile. From Ithwatch's point of view, his choice was undoubtedly the most correct approach at the moment. He no longer took the possible risk of fighting Senju Makautao to death, but went to the most important Soul King Palace instead. As long as the Soul King Palace is captured, even if the entire Invisible Empire is destroyed by the 13th Gotti Squad, it is not something difficult to accept. However, what Ithwatch did not know is that the most favorable choice he judged was also the most favorable choice for Senju Makautao. Now, those who stayed in this ice palace were all companions standing on the same side, and Unohana Retsu did not hide too much and spoke frankly. "Makautao, how do we go to the Soul King Palace next?" In this regard, Senju Makautao unexpectedly seemed to have no advanced preparations to facilitate entering the Soul King Palace at any time. In addition to the fact that the 72 demon barriers wrapped around the outer layer of the Soul King Palace were almost impossible to break through quietly, more importantly, Senju Makautao's current identity as the vice captain of the first squad of the 13th Gotti Squad did not require smuggling at all. For the 13th Gotti Squad, if they want to go to the Soul King Palace openly, what they lack is always an excuse. Just as if the Seireitei encountered an external enemy that the 13th Gotti Squad could not solve, the Zero Squad could go to help. Similarly, when the Soul King Palace was attacked by the enemy, the Gotti 13 had always been obliged to provide rapid support. Therefore, Senju Makautao did not need to create the King Key specifically, and could go to the Soul King Palace in the most official way. Let's go back to the Seireitei and use the flower crane cannon that has been preserved by the Shiba family, one of the 4 former nobles, to go to the Soul King Palace. Senju Cheng said, and then flew towards the space on the side of the secret garden, preparing to quickly return to the Soul Society through the space on that side that belonged to Senju Cheng's own creation. Immediately, Unohana Retsu, Shifu Yuan Orishi, Zaraki Sawaya and other Shinigami also quickly followed Senju Cheng. Although Kurosaki Ichigo slightly felt that the conversation between Senju Sumaya and Unohana Retsu seemed to hide some special meaning, he still followed subconsciously in the face of the risk of the world falling into crisis. However, just as Senju Cheng and others had just left the range of Ginka Castle, the beams of holy light directly enveloped the entire invisible empire. The Holy Cross Knights and more subordinate soldiers who were fighting fiercely with the death gods in various parts of the invisible empire had their abilities and powers belonging to the Queency quickly and forcibly extracted. Even after being enveloped by the light of holiness, many Queency's bodies turned directly into flying ash and completely dissipated. At this moment, boom! The entire silver frame city suddenly split in half from the middle. A stone platform that appeared out of thin air quickly rose up. In this stone platform, in addition to the injured King Puchizaraki who exuded the breath of a terrifying beast, there was also a messy blonde boy who seemed to have just been fighting with King Puchizaraki. Dreamer Gremi Tomu. Unlike the Queency and the entire invisible empire who were directly holy and had their powers and souls taken away, Gremi was not within the scope of holy. On the contrary, the power that was extracted by holiness was frantically transferred to Gremi's body. This abnormal situation also attracted the attention of all the death gods, who were staring at the blonde boy standing on a stone platform rising from the ruins of Silver Frame City. After observing Gremi for a few breaths, Senju Cheng slowly spoke. It seems that Yuabak doesn't want to let us leave the invisible empire so soon. Chapter 809 Fantasy Time. The next moment, the holy light of the entire invisible empire completely dimmed, and the spiritual pressure of the Queency that originally lived in the invisible empire also quickly dissipated. What it represents is death. Now, the only one who exudes terrifying spiritual pressure in the entire invisible empire is the blonde boy Grim. It's incredible, you seem to have become stronger again. King Puchizaraki, who had traces of injuries on his body, became more and more excited. He licked his lips and spoke. It seems that I made the right choice to release you from the cage with a special barrier. It's only interesting to kill a strong man like you. The Rim still looked indifferent and corrected. It's not that you let me out, but I simply decided to come out. As the strongest of the entire Stern-Crossed Knights, it's rare for me to see the invisible empire become lively. However, your majesty seems to have doubts about my power. He actually gave me more power by sanctifying the rest of them. When he said this, Gremi calmly glanced at the Queencies who were waiting for death after being sanctified not far away. In Gremi's eyes, there was no feeling of seeing the same kind, but more like looking at things that had nothing to do with him. However, Gremi thought of something the next moment, and his eyes flashed with some color, looking at a certain position in the Silver Frame City that had begun to collapse. The next moment, without Gremi's any movement, a certain direction of the Silver Frame City began to crack from the middle, until Litoto's room was revealed. At this moment, Minina, Candace and Litoto, who were lying in Litoto's room, were in a very bad state. Although they were not turned into ashes on the spot by the holy separation like some Queency, they encountered the Holy Grail while they were unconscious and unable to resist. Therefore, in addition to their own strength, most of the vitality of Litoto and the other two was robbed, and they were in a dying state. The next moment, Gremi's eyes condensed, and Litoto seemed to have received some kind of infusion. The dying state quickly disappeared and she stood up suddenly. When Litoto realized what happened, she hurriedly shouted in Gremi's direction. "Thank you, Gremi." Gremi did not intend to respond to this, and was about to look away from Litoto. "Wait, Gremi." Litoto found that Minina and Candace were also lying beside her and were dying. She gritted her teeth and asked, "Can you help Minina and Candace?" Gremi's eyes paused for a moment, and continued to move away from Litoto, but Minina and Candace recovered quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, before Litoto could open her mouth to thank Gremi, she saw the oppressive body of King Puchizaraki appear behind Gremi. "Kid, didn't anyone tell you not to be distracted when fighting?" At this moment, the yellow spiritual pressure that erupted from King Puchizaraki soared into the sky, and even a huge skull shadow was faintly formed above King Puchizaraki. This is a terrifying spiritual pressure that is several times more terrifying than King Puchizaraki's strongest state. Judging only by the magnitude, This level of spiritual pressure is no less than that of Bankai's Unohana Retsu. However, this knife that was watched by everyone made a huge sound of metal clashing when it fell on Gremmy's seemingly fair and tender neck. This scene made Kinpachi Zaraki look a little surprised. This was a blow that Kinpachi Zaraki had used all his strength to strike, but it was hard to break through the defenser. Grammy, who was stabbed, still did not look back. He searched the invisible empire and landed in the direction of Senju Cheng and others before he spoke. Zaraki, if it was me before, then maybe fighting you would be interesting, but after being granted a lot of holy power by His Majesty, I have improved not only my spiritual pressure, but also my own holy text ability V-Dreamer. In contrast, since it is an order issued by His Majesty himself, I have to execute it a little bit first, completely block the invisible empire, and not allow any god of death to leave. Almost as Grammy's voice fell, the connection gap formed by the collision of the two different spaces of Invisible Empire and Secret Garden disappeared instantly. No, to be more precise, it was as if time had flowed backwards, allowing the space of the Invisible Empire to return to the moment when the gap was not opened. This scene made Kurosaki Mairi look both shocked and excited, and he murmured, "Why did this change out of thin air without any fluctuations? This is unscientific." No, this is very scientific. If we study it carefully, it will definitely become very scientific. Zaraki Fuiya seemed to be in a daze for a while, and then he spoke. "Master Senju, I found a record about Grammy in the internal documents of the Invisible Empire. His ability is the Holy Word V-Dreamer, which means that he can instantly turn the imagination in his mind into reality. And even the body that Grammy is using now is a shell of his own imagination. His body is a brain sealed in a transparent container. In the past, the scope of Grammy's imagination that can be materialized can be roughly classified as creating space, creating objects, creating life, and creating abilities. However, Grammy cannot directly wipe out other lives through imagination. Unless Grammy has touched the other party, he can directly change the other party's body by transmitting his imagination into the other party's body. In addition, Grammy's emotions are quite indifferent. In addition to maintaining basic respect for Yuthwatch, he only occasionally communicates with Letoto. However, after Zaraki Cheng-ge quickly told this series of information, Senju Cheng, who was staring at Grammy, added, "Grammy's ability range has probably been further improved after his sanctification, including the ability to create time. For example, the passageway used to leave the Invisible Empire was replaced with the time before it appeared. So, if we don't have a shadow realm like Yuthwatch, if we want to leave the Invisible Empire, the fastest way at the moment is to defeat Grammy and restore the covered passage time to normal." Chapter 810 Solved. However, after Senju Cheng made his judgment, Kurosaki Ichigo was shocked and incomprehensible, and said, "Even time can be changed at any time through illusion. What is the difference between this power and God?" "Of course there is a difference," Senju Cheng corrected. "What's the difference?" "The difference is that Grammy is not a real god." Senju Cheng said something that made Kurosaki Ichigo feel a little confused. Grammy, who was far away on the stone platform, continued to ignore Kinpachi Zaraki behind him, and his voice spread to every corner of the Invisible Empire. Imagination is the endless power of mankind, and it is also a power that can surpass God. For example, like this, the next moment, Grammy clasped his hands together, and a giant wooden Buddha that was exactly the same as Moride Kamai's Buddha appeared out of thin air behind him, instantly occupying nearly half of the space of the entire Invisible Empire. The giant wooden Buddha, which exuded an aura that was no less than Moride Kamai's Buddha, also made the death gods scattered in various battlefields of the Invisible Empire feel their breaths stagnate. Is this the ability to create and replicate different abilities directly through imagination? The death gods had this idea almost at the same time. Grammy maintained the wooden giant Buddha that seemed to be able to destroy the entire Invisible Empire in an instant, and spoke. "For example, I have the ability of the Holy Word ability of Can-do. I steal through imagination, and use this ability on myself, and it is far beyond the limit of Can-do himself. Therefore, even if Kinpachi Zaraki tried his best, he would not be able to hurt me, so your fate has been decided. Stay in the Invisible Empire and have fun with me until you die." However, at this moment, a giant Buddha also rose behind Senju Cheng. On the left and right, it was as if there were two identical copies, and the Buddha wheel composed of countless Buddha palms behind the two giant Buddhas quickly turned. The next moment, the two giant Buddhas simultaneously slapped countless giant palms at each other. Boom boom boom. A seemingly endless roar sounded between the two giant Buddhas. The residual waves left by the collision of countless Buddha palms gradually formed an air wall between the two giant Buddhas, which was formed by the crazy expansion and bombardment of countless giant palms. The wood chips formed by the collision of wooden giant palms still scattered in this world like snow. It's useless, Gremmy said briefly, but a smile unconsciously appeared on his face, as if he had found a fun and durable toy. No, Gremmy, don't you realize the weakness of your own power? After a pause, Senju Cheng said directly without waiting for Gremmy to speak. Fantasy may be the most powerful force with various possibilities. Fantasy is endless, but individual fantasy has its limits. Even fantasy also needs to follow reality, follow the individual's own vision, experience, knowledge, etc. Just like a beggar would imagine whether the emperor can use a golden bowl when eating your fantasy, can you imagine the further power form of Mori Shangwofo? At the moment when Qian Shaoqing's voice fell, the wooden giant Buddha controlled by Qian Shaoqing obviously grew in size, and two more heads appeared on both sides of the head. In addition to the countless arms transformed by the Buddha wheel behind him, there were also two more pairs of arms on both sides of the shoulders. Boom! The next moment, before Gremmy could react, the three pairs of arms on the shoulders of the wooden giant Buddha seemed to be faintly covered with a layer of blue light, and then instantly broke through the barrier formed by countless Buddha palms, and directly blasted out the body of the fake Buddha. Crack, crack, the unimaginable huge body of the giant Buddha created by Gremmy suddenly exploded and disintegrated, turning into sawdust all over the sky. Amazing power, but it's meaningless. After destroying a giant Buddha, I can easily create more through imagination. However, before Gremmy could finish, Kinpachi Zaraki, Yorishi Shifin Yuan, and Retsu Unahana had already approached Gremmy, whose attention was completely attracted by Senju Cheng. Facing the siege of three top fighters, Gremmy's expression was obviously a little flustered. He didn't have time to imagine more, and instinctively maintained and strengthened the ability of Ice Steel. Dang dang dang. Three crisp and sharp sounds rang out, leaving Gremmy, who was still unscathed, with no time to breathe a sigh of relief. Bankai God-killing Gamma white light instantly crossed the distance and appeared in front of Gremmy's eyes. Gremmy's eyes were even more panicked. Ichimura Jin's ability is undoubtedly the nemesis of Ice Steel. As long as the body is penetrated by Ichimura Jin's Bankai, the remaining terrifying toxins will instantly ignore the hardness and melt the body's cells. Puff. Although Gremmy had consciously dodged, he was still pierced through the eyeball by the god-killing spear, and then went out from the back of his temple. Then, at the moment when the extended blade of the god-killing spear disappeared, half of Gremmy's head also melted instantly, revealing the brain inside the head that seemed to be protected by a sealed container. Fantasy activated. The next moment, Gremmy easily imagined himself in a safe and sound state in his mind, and almost instantly reversed the melted head to a complete state. However, when Gremmy's body had just recovered and was about to control his body to fight back, Gremmy suddenly found that his thinking speed seemed to have become much faster, and everything in the outside world, including everything in his body, seemed to have slowed down countless times. This difference is still increasing. Until, Gremmy's eyes moved, looking in the direction of Ichimura Jin, watching Ichimura Jin holding a knife in one hand and a pill in the other. Fantasy activation recovery. Gremmy kept trying to activate his ability to restore himself, who was in a strange state. However, even though Gremmy's thoughts and senses seemed to be countless times faster than normal, Gremmy's ability of the holy text could not be achieved by thoughts alone, and spiritual pressure was needed for its effect and maintenance. From the perspective of the Shinigami outside, Gremmy's body paused for nearly a second after it was restored to its original state, and then it seemed to be reset countless times between blur and clarity. Then, bang! Gremmy's head suddenly exploded inexplicably, and his body fell to the ground. This ups and downs, even the twists and turns, made Ichigo Kurosaki, who didn't even have time to take action, look confused and asked subconsciously. Is it solved? Solved. Senju Cheng responded calmly, and the space passage leading to the secret garden reappeared not far behind him. Chapter 811. Atonement with the body. Senju Cheng's calm tone made Kurosaki Ichigo's clear eyes blink subconsciously. Solved, solved. The enemy who made Kurosaki Ichigo subconsciously feel that there was no solution just by listening to the description of the ability information was solved just like that. Gremmy, who seemed to be close to a god with his imagination and could easily change space, time, ability, etc. Died just like that. Even though Kurosaki Ichigo clearly sensed that Gremid's spiritual pressure had completely disappeared, and the fallen corpse had no breath at all, it still felt like a dream. At this moment, Senju Cheng was ready to lead all the Shinigami back to the Silent Soul Court. If Yubaba did not take the initiative to holy the Queen Sea in the Invisible Empire, then Senju Cheng could only hurriedly lead a part of the main combat force back to the Silent Soul Court first. However, now that the Dreamer Gremi has been dealt with, there are actually no enemies in the entire Invisible Empire, except for Litoto, Guard Eyes, and Minina, and it seems that Gremi and their unholy text abilities have been restored. However, under the gazes of many captains, although Litoto was sad about the death of Gremi, her rare playmate in the Invisible Empire, she still consciously squatted down with Guard Eyes and Minina with her hands on her head. More importantly, for Litoto, Guard Eyes, and Minina, they no longer have a reason to fight. Being sanctified by Yubaba is undoubtedly equivalent to being abandoned and betrayed by Yubaba. At this moment, Litoto, Guard Eyes, and Minina, who gradually turned their loyalty and faith in Yubaba into hatred and anger. Even for Gremi's death, Litoto attributed most of the reasons to Yubaba. To Yuthwatch, they were just abandoned pawns. The innocent Gremi simply didn't realize that perhaps Yuthwatch had never thought that he could defeat the Gotti 13 from the beginning, and just wanted to use his life to delay time and create more killings and souls for Yuthwatch. Therefore, Litoto, Candice, and Minina did not resist the layers of ghost seals that Wallen Tess and Arishoda Bokuchin had placed on them. Then, Litoto watched Kurosaki Mayuri, whose body was full of weirdness, as if a vicious dog had smelt the defensor, and collected Gremi's body and the brains that were blown everywhere with a greedy face. In the end, Litoto couldn't help but shout in the direction of Kurosaki Mayuri. "Hey, don't do weird things with Gremi's body." Kurosaki Mayuri's originally excited expression froze, and his head quickly turned to Litoto's side, saying expressionlessly, "So do you want to replace him and become my important experiment?" Instantly, Litoto, Joggers, and Minina felt a chill rushing from their feet to their heads, and suddenly realized that falling into the hands of the god of death seemed no better than dying in holy separation just now. At this moment, Senju Cheng's gentle back blocked Litoto, Joggers, and Minina, and also blocked the terrifying eyes of Kurosaki Mayuri. "Okay, Captain Kurosaki Mayuri, please don't make such a bad joke." "Yes," Kurosaki Mayuri responded with a long tone, turned his head back again, and muttered, "Don't you look down at yourself." As soon as these words came out, Litoto, Joggers, and Minina subconsciously looked down at themselves. Joggers raised her head confidently, but Minina felt that it was too big and subconsciously curled her back, not wanting to be too exaggerated. As for Litoto, she was as satisfied as ever with her perfectly displayed slender jade feet. However, when Mayuri Kurosaki finished his next sentence, Litoto and the other two froze. With that rubbish body that is worthless to study, the three of them together can't even produce 1/10 of Gremi's brain, and you still want to replace Gremi and become an important experimental subject. Litoto, Joggers, Minina. Ahem, Senju Cheng coughed lightly, breaking the somewhat frozen atmosphere, and spoke. "Sorry, Captain Mayuri Kurosaki has a bit of a weird personality, but he is still a very good person, and he will never do such a thing to abuse prisoners. The Seireitei will treat prisoners preferentially, and the treatment of prisoners is also very humane, as long as the prisoners cooperate enough." Litoto and the other two smiled reluctantly at the same time, looked at Senju Cheng timidly, and nodded one after another. "Cooperate. Cooperate. Absolutely cooperate." Seeing this, Senju Cheng's smile became even brighter and gentler, and then he said, "Then I have a small request, and you three won't refuse it, right?" "What request?" asked Guard Eyes, gritting her teeth. "That is, to borrow your bodies for a while. No, to be more precise, to check your bodies." At this point, Senju Cheng did not forget to introduce himself. "Don't worry, as everyone knows, I am one of the most outstanding doctors in the Seireitei, and I will never cause any irreversible permanent damage to your bodies." Can we refuse?" Minina looked like she was about to cry. Before Senju Cheng could speak, Kurosaki Mayuri, Kinpachi Zaraki, Yunahana Retsu, and Yorishi Shiuin, who were standing around, all cast concerned and inquiring eyes. Litoto, Guard Eyes, and Minina. In the end, Litoto, Guard Eyes, and Minina very actively agreed to Senju Cheng's request, and claimed that it was also to atone for the destruction of a large number of buildings when they attacked the Seireitei before. Even if Senju Cheng did not make this small request, they would find ways to atone for their sins in various ways. Therefore, Senju Cheng's initiative to speak was tantamount to pointing out a clear path for Litoto and the other two, a path leading to a friendly and bright future. It was reasonable to atone for sins with one's body, after all, given the current situation of the Gotti 13, even if Litoto and the other two abandoned the dark and joined the Seireitei to fight against Youthwatch, their combat power would not be a decisive factor. On the contrary, Senju Cheng was quite interested in their bodies that had undergone holy separation and thought they were worth studying. During the friendly consultation between Senju Cheng and Litoto and the other two, the death gods who attacked the Invisible Empire had gathered again, and then followed Unohana and Senju Cheng through the secret garden space without stopping, and returned directly to the Seireitei. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 812. The Reckless Man and the Old Vixen. However, what puzzled Ichigo Kurosaki was that Makoto Senju did not directly take Litoto, Candice, and Minina back to the Seireitei, but left them in the secret garden. After returning to the Seireitei, Unohana and Makoto Senju also cooperated with each other to quickly arrange various arrangements, trying to contact the 0 Division while preparing to go to the Soul King Palace for support. In a rare gap of Makoto Senju, Ichigo Kurosaki could not help but ask, "So Senju, is it really okay to leave Litoto and the three queensies in the shadow space?" Makoto Senju replied with a calm attitude, "Ichigo, don't worry. In this special situation, the secret garden is a more suitable place to further study the holy separation from the Seireitei." As for the specific reasons, Makoto Senju did not explain. However, Ichigo Kurosaki naturally thought of the factor of safety. After Youthwatch took the initiative to give up the Invisible Empire, the safety level of the secret garden was undoubtedly higher than the Seireitei, which could become a battlefield again at any time. After figuring this out, Ichigo Kurosaki couldn't help but ask another question hidden in his heart. "Senju-sama, how could Gremi's holy text ability V-Dreamer be defeated for no apparent reason?" "No apparent reason? Ichigo, why do you think so?" Makoto Senju asked back. Gremi's body itself was created by his own ability. Even though Captain Genichimaru's Bankai caused quite exaggerated damage to his body, it was far from being able to defeat Gremi. Ichigo Kurosaki spoke out his doubts in one breath, looking at Makoto Senju eagerly, hoping to get the corresponding answer. Facing Ichigo Kurosaki's question, Makoto Senju did not show any impatience, but asked instead, "Ichigo, in your opinion, is fighting a test of instinct, or something else?" "Instinct?" Ichigo Kurosaki blurted out subconsciously, and then felt that something was wrong. However, during the days of training with Kinpachi Zaraki, Ichigo Kurosaki thoroughly saw how terrifying Kinpachi Zaraki was, who was constantly exploring his instincts. Moreover, in Ichigo Kurosaki's past battles, the fighting concepts advocated by Zanpakutō and the concepts advocated by Kendo all involved the exploration and development of instincts. "This answer is both correct and wrong," Senju Makoto said, then looked at Ichigo Kurosaki with a deep gaze and said, "The so-called instinct is actually the power hidden in the deepest part of a Shinigami's heart, but a Shinigami controlled by instinct is a beast, and a Shinigami who controls instinct is a qualified Shinigami. And if you rely entirely on instinct to fight, sooner or later you'll encounter an opponent who exceeds the limit of your own instinct. Gremi is the kind of opponent that cannot be truly defeated by instinct." Ichigo Kurosaki heard this and nodded with a vague understanding. In response, Senju Makoto explained in detail in a gentle tone. "Gremi's ability seems to be omnipotent, but it is only a normal mind that controls this ability. A normal mind cannot easily do two things at once, nor can it remain absolutely calm and have all kinds of fantasies when encountering emergencies. Fantasy has no limit, but personal thinking, reaction, and imagination have limits." Hearing this, Kurosaki Ichigo suddenly understood why the seemingly omnipotent Gremi was so vulnerable. It seems that when Gremi was controlling the wooden giant Buddha to fight against Senju Makoto, he had already fallen into a trap. Then, how did Gremi die? Kurosaki Ichigo was still a little puzzled. With Gremi's ability to easily create different times, it can be said that as long as all consciousness is not annihilated instantly, it is likely that it can be restored to its original state instantly. Senju Makoto answered. While Captain Ichimarajin's zanpakutō pierced through Grammy, he also successfully delivered a superhuman drug researched by Captain Mayuri Kurosaki into Grammy's body. That drug is not a poison, but something that can increase the speed of thinking countless times. 1 second for us. Hundreds of years have passed for Grammy, and these hundreds of years were infinitely close to being still. And during the hundreds of long years that Grammy spent in his mind, he must have tried countless times to recover his abnormality through illusions. However, no matter how fast Grammy's thinking speed is, it takes time for his spiritual pressure and spirit body to respond. So, Grammy was not killed by anyone, but was killed by the illusion ability that had accumulated over hundreds of years at the moment when his spirit body was restored through his ability. At that moment, Grammy reset his own spirit body tens of thousands of times. It's said that the person who manipulates illusions eventually dies from illusions. Finally, Senju Cheng said with some regrets. As for Ichigo Kurosaki, who used to believe in the powerful brick flying, he felt that his horizons were refreshed. In fact, Ichigo Kurosaki inexplicably had a feeling that the adult world is really terrible, full of calculations everywhere. And Makoto Senju looked at Ichigo Kurosaki, who was a little dazed, and said, "Ichigo, the reason I told you so much is that I hope you can understand that you should not rely entirely on instinct to fight, but to control your instinct to defeat your opponent." Similar to the terrible ability of the Dreamer, it seems unsolvable, but in fact, as long as you have enough information, there are countless flaws. This sentence is undoubtedly Makoto Senju's sincere words. In this world, the fighting styles of the strong can be said to be seriously polarized. There are countless reckless men, and the old shady ones are more terrible than each other. And people like Raisin Sasuke, Makoto Senju, and Mayuri Kurosaki, as long as they have enough information and have enough time to prepare, it is probably not difficult to play with any opponent. That is why Makoto Senju has tried his best to hide his information in the past few decades, and he dared not reveal his true ability in front of the Zero Squad. For the old shaman, whoever takes the first move will have an unparalleled advantage. I just don't know how far the conflict between Ithwatch and Hyoshugu Ichiba has progressed. Makoto Senju looked past Ichigo Kurosaki, who was lost in thought, and unconsciously looked at the sky above the Seireitei. Not far behind Makoto Senju, the fireworks cannon that has been guarded by the Shiba family for generations and couldn't go to the Soul King Palace is about to be ready. Chapter 813. I just want to kill you. At this moment, inside the Soul King Palace, after Ithwatch led Aizen Sasuke, Haskvald, Ishidori and the God's Pardon guards into the Soul King Palace, they were immediately blocked by the Zero Squad. Zero Squad. The combat power of each member of the Zero Squad is undoubtedly far greater than that of ordinary captains, not to mention that they have also been transformed by the power of the Soul King. Therefore, under the attack of the God's Pardon guards, whose holy text abilities are also terrifying. In less than a moment, the God's Pardon guards were completely defeated by the Zero Squad. This is even without the appearance of the most mysterious Hyoshugu Ichiba. The members of the Zero Squad showed absolute combat power. Until, Ithwatch frowned. Grammy is dead. At this moment, the huge amount of power that was allocated to Grammy by Ithwatch through holy separation returned to Ithwatch himself. This made Ithwatch's eyes flash with a hint of surprise, and at the same time, after entering the Soul King Palace, his expression, which had always been neither hurried nor slow, became more urgent. Grammy alone could not possibly kill the entire GOTY 13, but Grammy's defeat speed far exceeded Ithwatch's expectations. The ability of the Holy Work V Dreamer is, to some extent, quite close to the ability of omniscience and omnipotence that Ithwatch has not yet truly awakened. Actually, you can't even stop Senju Makoto and those death gods for half a day. Then, the shadow that Senju Makoto had left in his heart unconsciously made Ithwatch inexplicably anxious. Hurry. At least we have to completely control the situation before Senju Makoto and those death gods come to support the Soul King Palace. With this thought in mind, Ithwatch raised his palm, and the holy light appeared on the body of the God's Pardon guards, which had already suffered casualties. The terrifying power that had almost holized more than 99% of the Queensies was distributed in large quantities to the shrine guards. In an instant, the strength of the holy word ability of the God's Pardon guards itself has undergone a qualitative change. The sudden change in the strength of the holy words of the Divine Pardon guards seemed to far exceed the expectations of the Zero Division. In less than a moment, Namuro, Kirinji Tenshiro, Haikifunkyurai, Shutara Senjumara, all fell to the ground in defeat. However, Ithwatch did not go directly to the Soul King's great Uptino, which seemed to be within reach, but instead gave orders to the people around him. You stay here to stop the GOTY 13 that are about to support the Soul King Palace. Do not allow them to get close to the Soul King's great Uchino under any circumstances. Yes. Haskvalth, Ishitarai and the Divine Pardon Guards responded without hesitation. Then, Yhwach stepped into the Soul King's great Uchino alone, where only Hyoshogu Ichibari was left guarding. Soon, boom. Two amazing auras came out of the Soul King's great Uchino, followed by a series of amazing collision waves. This made most of the Divine Pardon Guards who were paying attention to the Soul King's great Uchino look excited. As long as His Majesty defeats Ichibari Hyoshogu, then, His Majesty will be able to become the Soul King and successfully seize the entire world. At this moment, the long-cherished wish that the Holy Cross Knights have been pursuing for thousands of years seems to be about to be realized. Only Haskvalth and Ishitarai's expressions are still so calm, with a calm attitude. However, compared to Haskvalth, who seems to be really resting with his eyes closed, Ishitarai's attention is mostly focused on Aizen Sosok standing on the other side. But facing Ishitarai's obscure hostile eyes, Aizen Sosok, who seems to have sensed something, responded with a meaningful smile. The next moment, before Ishitarai could think about what this smile meant, the 72-layer ghost barrier on the outer layer of the Soul King Palace produced obvious fluctuations. Here they come. The expressions of the Divine Pardon Guards changed slightly in an instant, and they understood that it was the enemy that His Majesty needed them to stop. The next moment, the spiritual pressure emitted by the Shinigami who broke through the ghost barrier with the help of the fireworks cannon also appeared in the perception of the Shinshi's guards. Boom. In the vigilant and hostile eyes of the Shinshi's guards, Senju Cheng and Unohana led a group of Shinigami to the Soul King Palace. However, compared with the attack on the Invisible Empire, the number of Shinigami who appeared at this moment has been reduced a lot. Not only because some captains and vice-captains were injured and needed treatment, but also the number of people that the fireworks cannon could send to the Soul King Palace at one time was also limited. More importantly, in the next battle, some Shinigami with too low combat power may not be of much use even if they participate. Therefore, leisurely Barrow's eyes swept through the figures behind Senju Cheng and Unohana one by one. Kurosaki Ichigo, Zaraki Kinpachi, Kurosaki Mayuri, Zaraki Sawada, Shifen Yuan Yorishi, and Kusaka Yarai who was hanging behind Zaraki Kinpachi. 7-7, just right. Gerard said with a bit of excitement on his face. As for the seemingly harmless Kusaka Hakurai, who had average spiritual pressure, in Gerard's eyes, he was not a human being, but could only be considered a pendant. Makoto Senju also quickly looked around, and then looked at the Soul King's great Uchino, which was blocked by the shrine guards and others, and felt the spiritual pressure collision that continued to erupt in the Soul King's great Uchino. At this moment, the Death Gods knew very well that Yhwach had already set foot in the Soul King's great Uchino where the Soul King lived. The next moment, Makoto Senju hardly needed to speak. Figures including Makoto Senju seemed to be extremely anxious and shot away from different directions, trying to break into the Soul King's great Uchino to stop Yhwach. After all, in the open concept, the safety of the Soul King involves the safety of the entire world, and Yhwach must not be allowed to hurt the Soul King. However, before Makoto Senju could get close to the Soul King's great Uchino, the figure of Aizen Sosok blocked Makoto Senju's way. In addition, the Shinigami in other directions were also intercepted. Haskvalth stopped Ichigo Kurosaki, and Peneda stood in front of Yorishi Shiuin. In addition, the other Shinigami were not so much stopped as Kinpachi Zaraka took the initiative to find Gerard, and Mayuri Kurosaki targeted Yasukin. As for the cold and calm Uchiiri Barrow, there was an elegant and gentle figure. Uchiiri Barrow, who had originally planned to secretly kill a few tricky guys, couldn't help but look a little more surprised and said, "It seems that Captain General Unohana made a wrong decision. My ability all things penetration cannot be blocked by the so-called swordsmanship." Block. Unohana's smile became more gloomy and brilliant, and his squinting eyes slowly opened a little, and said, "Sorry, I don't have that idea. I just want to cut you, starting from the temple." Chapter 814. The Holy Body Got Punishment. Chapter 814. Complete Holy Body Got Punishment Temple. Leisurely Barrow was slightly startled by the word that Unohana seemed to mention on purpose, and then he reacted and said, "Oh, so that's it. The reason you took the initiative to find me was because my bullet grazed Senju Makoto's temple. It seems that the relationship between you and Senju Makoto is very special." "Of course, he is my beloved disciple," Unohana replied. "Really? Then if I help Senju Makoto open a few more holes in his head later, Captain Unohana will be even more angry, right?" Leisurely Barrow asked in a calm tone. Do you think you will have this opportunity again? The murderous intent exuded by Unohana became more and more intense, and even the murderous intent that was almost materialized spread, as if large patches of blood-red Unohana flowers were slowly blooming with Unohana as the center. This scene, in the eyes of the nobles 1,000 years ago, was like a nightmare. Whenever the killing intent bloomed like a bloody flower, it also meant that the woman who called herself Seireitei was about to enter a terrifying killing state. However, Seireitei suddenly raised the sniper rifle in his hand and pointed it at Unohana, saying sarcastically, "Times have long changed, Captain Unohana, the so-called sword is only the fate of being pierced by me. Everything penetrates." Before Seireitei's voice could completely reach Unohana's ears, a bullet endowed with the ability of everything penetrates had almost approached Unohana's chest. Such a speed did not give Unohana much chance to raise his sword to block. No, or rather, Unohana had no intention of blocking at all. Because Unohana was already very clear that the ability of everything penetrates could not be blocked by blocking. Puff. The next moment, Unohana's chest had an extra penetrating wound. Seeing this, Seireitei couldn't help but raise a trace of contempt at the corner of his mouth and spoke. "Is this the extent of the so-called captain-in-chief? It's really disappointing." However, Seireitei suddenly realized that something was wrong. The spiritual pressure of Unohana, whose chest was pierced by a bullet, did not weaken rapidly, but surged wildly. Moreover, the blood-colored Unohana, which was originally formed by Unohana's murderous intent and almost materialized, seemed to become more delicate and beautiful. And the blood that kept pouring out of the wound on Unohana's chest was slowly raised by Unohana to catch part of it, and then slowly wiped it on the blade of the zanpakutō. As Unohana's palm passed, the blade completely turned into a bloody color that made people instinctively chill. Bankai. All ending Unohana's eyes raised to Seireitei, and the bloody all-enduring space instantly enveloped Seireitei. This is a bloody world. Even Seireitei couldn't help but feel an instinctive sense of fear, as if at this moment he had turned into a prey whose fate had been determined. Playing tricks. Since one wound is not fatal enough, I will create more wounds for you. Seireitei said impatiently, and raised the sniper rifle in his hand towards Unohana again. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots in a row. 3 bullets endowed with the everything penetrates feature flew towards Unohana at a terrifying speed, and aimed at the 3 vital points of the forehead, heart, and throat respectively. In addition, under the everything penetrates feature, the bullets are immune to all obstacles including air resistance during flight. This also makes the speed of these 3 bullets almost impossible to distinguish the specific trajectory with the naked eye. However, in Seireitei's rather shocked eyes, Unohana seemed to rely on some kind of physical instinct. At the moment when Unohana figure appeared a little blurred, the 3 bullets passed by Unohana figure. The next moment, Seireitei felt that the spirit weapon in the shape of a sniper rifle in his hand lightened, and was already cut in half by the blood blade in Unohana hand. What's going on? Is time confused? Seireitei was shocked. It was obvious that Unohana had just dodged the bullet in the previous moment, so how could he appear in front of him the next moment? Wait, it's murderous intent. I was inadvertently intimidated by the terrifying murderous intent, so my nerve reaction was problematic, so I felt a sense of time confusion. When Seireitei figured this out, he suddenly felt a pain in his chest. A pitch-black hidden blade had pierced through his chest. Moreover, Unohana, with a cold look in his eyes, raised the blood blade with his other hand and pointed it at the temple on the side of Seireitei's closed eye, saying, "Your fighting instinct is really weak. You can't even withstand my murderous intent, so you feel a sense of time confusion." Swoosh. Almost as Unohana finished speaking, the tip of the blood blade pierced Seireitei's temple. Just as Unohana said at the beginning, he wanted to cut Seireitei from the temple. It was just that under the stimulation of the survival instinct, under the stimulation of Unohana eyes that seemed to see a lamb to be slaughtered, "Don't joke, I am the queen, see that His Majesty first gave the power of the holy word. I am His Majesty's highest masterpiece and the man closest to God." Seireitei, who had always seemed calm, roared out of control, and his tightly closed left eye with a black cross haze suddenly opened. Perfect holy body got judgment in an instant, a yellow light burst out from Seireitei's body. Unohana saw this, and the speed of the blood blade in his hand was even faster, trying to cut off Seireitei's head first. However, in Unohana-Retsu's eyes, there was a hint of surprise, and the blood blade hit leisurely Barrow's head, but there was no familiar feeling of a sharp blade cutting through flesh and blood. Unohana-Retsu's figure quickly retreated dozens of meters, watching leisurely Barrow's new perfect holy body posture after the yellow light gradually dissipated. Unlike ordinary perfect holy bodies, Uchiha's body was completely wrapped in a white pewter-like object, and 4 pairs of wings with 3 holes were spread out behind him. Perfect holy body. Unohana-Retsu frowned slightly and said with some surprise. After all, with Meguri Kurosaki and Makoto Senju arriving at the Soul King Palace, they should have dispersed the spirit particles that could interfere with the perfect holy body into the Soul King Palace. Here, your little tricks of destroying the stability of the perfect holy body may be effective for ordinary Holy Cross Knights, but for us, the gods who have been given a lot of holy power by His Majesty, it is meaningless. A mere 1 or 2 drops of ink can't pollute the color of the sea. Uchiha said as he slowly floated into the air and looked down at Unohana-Retsu. Chapter 815 The name of 8,000 flows. Complete holy body. So what? It just adds a little fun to your death process. Unohana-Retsu said with his face unchanged. What a wishful thinking. In this state, I'm infinitely close to the existence of God, and I am completely different from those guys like Gremi who claim to be the strongest, Uchiha said slowly. In this state, in addition to being able to use all things penetration more freely, both physical damage and ghost damage achieved through spirit particles are ineffective against me. With you are not qualified to touch me who is comparable to God. Unohana-Retsu slowly raised the Jirijin in his hand, posed a swordsmanship stance, and asked back in a cold tone. It sounds like it's only this extent. This statement undoubtedly further angered Uchiha, who wanted to see a panic expression on Unohana-Retsu's face. What do you mean, only this extent? I will make you regret such arrogant words. Uchiha said angrily, and the 8 wings behind him lit up at the same time. The next moment, the 8 wings simultaneously released spirit-like columns with the ability of penetrating all things, staggered and covered towards Malziwalai. Malziwalai's figure flickered, and he did not retreat, but took the initiative to face the direction of leisurely Barrow. Boom boom boom. Wherever the spirit-like columns passed, everything was penetrated, and even broke through the blockade of the all-enduring space and blasted out a gap to the outside world. Under such a terrifying covering attack, Malziwalai showed amazing fighting instincts. Even without the naked eye to observe the trajectory of the spirit-like column, the body automatically danced in the attacks, avoiding the spirit-like columns that could be fatal if touched. However, no matter how fast Malziwalai was, no matter how accurately he judged the correct dodge direction with his fighting instinct amplified by the all-enduring space. Under the continuous attacks without stopping, Malziwalai's spirit body was soon touched by the spirit-like column, and then his flesh and blood were wiped out. Shoulders, thighs, waist, however, being in the space of all things, with Unohana-Retsu's Kido level, unless Unohana-Retsu gave up treatment, there was almost no possibility of death unless Unohana-Retsu's spiritual pressure was completely exhausted. Therefore, let alone these insignificant injuries, even the injury that pierced Unohana-Retsu's chest before was self-healed by Unohana-Retsu in an instant with an efficiency that was not inferior to super speed regeneration. However, even though Unohana-Retsu showed amazing resilience and self-healing ability, he was still getting closer to leisurely Barrow little by little. Leisurely Barrow looked at Unohana-Retsu with a teasing look, as if he was deliberately slowing down the rhythm of the attack, preparing to tease Unohana-Retsu, giving the woman who was still emitting terrifying murderous intent the deepest despair. And this scene, through the gap bombarded by the all things through spirit-like column, was also seen by Senju Makoto and Aizen Sasuke who were fighting frantically in the other direction. Of course, this so-called fighting is more of an illusion created by Mirror Flower Water Moon. Perhaps the ability of Mirror Flower Water Moon cannot conceal or affect Senju Makoto himself, but Senju Makoto has concealed himself with the ghost barrier. So what kind of fighting illusion Aizen Sasuke wants to create through Mirror Flower Water Moon is just a matter of thought. All things connected, this ability seems to be quite restraining Captain Unohana. Makoto needs to consider changing the original plan in order to rescue Captain Unohana. Aizen Sasuke asked calmly, as if he had expected Unohana-Retsu to be a drag. When Senju Makoto heard this, he smiled and said, Aizen-kun, it seems that you don't know Unohana teacher well enough. What? Unohana teacher's fighting instinct is jumping for joy. When Senju Makoto said this, there was a little more smile on his face. However, Aiden Sosok, who has never relied on the so-called fighting instinct to improve himself, had a hint of confusion in his eyes for what Senju Cheng said, and analyzed rationally. The ability of penetrating all things is simply unstoppable for swordsmanship, and after Seireitei Barrow entered this special state of perfect holy body, his spirit body has completely surpassed the common sense structure. Normal physical damage or ghost damage may not be effective. It is almost like entering a different dimension. Captain Unohana's sword cannot touch Seireitei Barrow's perfect holy body. In the end, Aiden Sosok came to his own conclusion and judgment. Aizen Kum's analysis is completely correct, but he forgot one thing. Senju Cheng replied. Oh? What's wrong with my judgment? Aiden Sosok asked directly. Senju Cheng looked through the gap in the all-encompassing space, stared at Unohana Retsu, and spoke. Aizen Kum once said something like he has mastered the zanpakutō to the limit of a Shinigami, so it should be clear that in fact, the limits of each Shinigami in different directions are also completely different. It's like Captain Zaraku's instant step. Even if he practices it for another 1,000 years, he can't catch up with Seireitei in terms of speed. This is the difference in talent and ability, and the different limits destined for different Shinigami. Aiden Sosok nodded and said. That's right, but Captain Unohana himself reached his limit 1,000 years ago. Suddenly, Aiden Sosok's voice paused, and he realized something and said a word. Spirit superposition. Senju Cheng did not answer, but Aiden Sosok already knew the answer. At this moment, Aiden Sosok looked at the space of all things again. Unohana Retsu seemed to be completely at a disadvantage, but he saw a new possibility. After Unohana Sensei completed spiritual body superposition, he already had the possibility to further advance his swordsmanship that had stagnated for 1,000 years. However, the progress of swordsmanship also requires new tempering. After a pause, Senju Cheng looked at the all-encompassing space that covered an area and spoke. And Unohana Sensei's Bankai, all-encompassing. In fact, in addition to providing Unohana Sensei with the best fighting venue and perfect fighting experience, more importantly, is the seemingly insignificant increase in instinct. It was also at the help of the increase in instinct that Unohana Sensei could easily master countless swordsmanship schools while slaying countless swordsmen in Soul Society, and he claimed to represent the ultimate Yakatsurai. Now, Right will definitely be defeated by Unohana Sensei's sword, allowing Unohana Sensei to master the swordsmanship that is enough to kill gods. Chapter 816. The final form of the punishment of the holy body of the Quincy. Chapter 816. Quincy completes holy body god punishment final form. Listening to Makoto Senju's judgment without a trace of doubt, Aiden Sosok's expression has a little more surprise and a little bit of envy. And Aiden Sosok did not refute Makoto Senju's judgment. With Unohana Retsu's swordsmanship that has already reached the peak, if he can break through the limit again, it is really difficult to simply judge to what extent he can reach. However, since Makoto Senju has such confidence in Unohana Retsu, Aiden Sosok will not spoil his friend's interest, and instead sweep his eyes to the rest of the battlefield. Except for Ishidori and Zarakisawa, the rest of the Shinigami and the Quincy have already started fighting. Among them, except for the duel between Askvath and Kurosaki Ichigo, which seems to be evenly matched, the rest of the members of the God's Guard are in a certain advantage. The fight between Gerard and Kinpachi Zaraki was a battle between two beasts. The duel between Yasukin and Mayuri Kurosachi was full of weirdness. Finally, it was Penida who took off her white cloak and revealed her body as a left hand as tall as a person, which made Shifu Yuan Yorishi feel quite difficult and troublesome. Aiden Sosok's eyes moved slightly, staring at the innate shape of Penida's palm, secretly judging. Sure enough, the body of the holy letter C enforcement Penida Packager is the left arm of the Soul King. And Penida's ability seems to be affected by the body being the left arm of the Soul King. In addition to manipulating the nerves to spread out of the body to manipulate and change everything it touches, it also has the characteristics of a continuous evolution opposite to Yukita Jushiro's stillness. At the beginning, Shifu Yuan Yorishi was able to avoid Penida's divergent nerves with her terrifying speed while maintaining the attack and suppression on Penida. However, under the constant attack of Yorishi Shiuin, Penida's speed, reaction, and ability to fight with a single blow are almost increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. As a result, the battle between Yorishi Shiuin and Penida has gradually evolved into a one-sided pursuit, and Yorishi Shiuin can only lead Penida away from the rest of the battlefield as much as possible. However, neither Senju Makoto nor Aizen Sosok showed any special reaction to this. With the ability of Yorishi Shiuin, it can still last for quite a long time. In contrast, Senju Makoto's attention is more on the battle between Leggeri Barrow and Unohana Retsu. Boom boom boom. All in a space. One after another, the spirit light pillars endowed with the characteristics of everything is connected continue to pour towards Unohana Retsu. Under the ability of everything is connected, these spirit light pillars cannot be blocked at all. Therefore, Unohana Retsu completely relied on his terrifying fighting instinct and speed to avoid the intertwined big nets one after another. The distance between Unohana Retsu and Leggeri Barrow was even closer. Leggeri Barrow even felt that he was in the blood-colored sea of flowers formed by Unohana Retsu's murderous intent, and was about to be buried in this blood-colored sea of flowers and become new nutrients. However, Leggeri Barrow's eyes were like a god looking down at the human who was struggling to touch him, raging, playing, and expecting. Unohana Retsu's figure dancing and dodging in the spiritual light pillars was extremely dangerous, much more dangerous than walking on a sea of fire and swords, and could be overturned at any time. As long as Unohana Retsu accidentally touched some muscles that would affect his movements, a series of reactions would cause Unohana Retsu to be instantly submerged and penetrated by the spiritual light pillar. In this case, Unohana Retsu did not retrieve but advanced. This belief and will made Leggeri Barrow admire it, and he also wanted to see the surprise and despair of not being able to touch the enemy with the blade on the face of this beautiful woman. The next moment, a gap appeared between the spiritual light pillars that were constantly bombarding Unohana Retsu. Unohana Retsu's figure instantly accelerated, shortening the distance between him and Leggeri Barrow to the point where the blade could touch him. Cut. Bloodblade is all gone, just like a blood moon rising in the all-ending space, completely submerging Leggeri Barrow's figure. The spiritual light pillars that were constantly bombarding suddenly stopped, and Unohana Retsu's figure also appeared in front of Leggeri Barrow, and the bloodblade in his hand was sunk into Leggeri Barrow's head. Leggeri Barrow's expression was a little surprised, and he looked at bloodblade steadily. However, the next moment, the surprised expression on Leggeri Barrow's face turned into a joke again, and he moved his mouth slightly, saying word by word. "It's useless," Leggeri Barrow said, while slowly retreating until he was out of the range of bloodblade. What was revealed in front of Unohana Retsu was the intact posture of Leggeri Barrow, as if the knife just now did not touch Leggeri Barrow at all. Ha 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 ha. Seeing that Unohana Retsu's expression seemed to have no change, Leggeri Barrow could not help but burst into laughter. Despair? Captain Unohana, this kind of despair of advancing at the risk of your life, but still unable to touch the opponent. And this is also that future of your GOTY 13. You so-called death gods will never be qualified to touch the great majesty. Next, you should open your eyes and see my true posture and power. Queen, see complete holy body divine judgment final form. As Leggeri Barrow's voice fell, his appearance changed again, and the whole person was like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon. All the appearance characteristics that originally belonged to Leggeri Barrow disappeared, and the whole person had completely transformed into a huge monster with a long neck, a bird head, 4 legs, and 8 wings. At this moment, Unohana Retsu's figure seemed extremely small in front of Leggeri Barrow. From a distance, it looked like a god and a beautiful flower floating in the wind. As long as the god raised his hands and feet slightly, the flower would completely wither and dissipate. Leggeri Barrow, who had transformed into a huge monster, twisted his strange head with 2 big eyes, squinted at Unohana Retsu who was looking down, and said, "Do you feel it? The true perfect holy body, and the dimensional gap between the 2 sides that cannot be measured at all. I feel it." Unohana Retsu spoke slowly. However, before Leggeri Barrow's strange head could show a trace of pride and satisfaction, Unohana Retsu's next sentence made Leggeri Barrow's expression freeze. "After 1,000 years, I finally feel the motivation and desire to cut off the gap again." Chapter 817. Cutting down the god with a sword. What? Leggeri Barrow turned his head to the side, but was unable to react. All the power was given to you by Thwatch, you simply cannot understand it. Unohana Retsu loosened the hidden blade in his left hand, and then held the blood blade in both hands, posing the most basic, but also the most refined stance of Kendo. Just like an apprentice who has just started learning Kendo, but exuding the ultimate sharpness and naturalness. As an ordinary soul in Cheng-ge, I have not been given any power. All my power comes from the fights I have fought against powerful enemies again and again. For you, defeating an opponent weaker than yourself is common sense, but for me, chopping off the heads of enemies stronger than myself is a daily routine, and it can be called a real fight. It's a pity that the kind of fight that can give me supreme pleasure came to an abrupt end 1,000 years ago, because I'm already the strongest in Kendo, and looking around, there are no enemies worth fighting. Hanaretsu stated calmly word by word, and the spirit emanating from his body seemed to awaken something in Lijibao's eyes. The next moment, Hanaretsu's eyes, which had been drooping calmly, suddenly widened, and his long hair like a waterfall suddenly spread out, and he spoke. And the fun is found again. Things that my blade cannot reach, do not exist. Suddenly, Lijibao suddenly understood what was wrong in the previous battle. The rumored Hanaretsu was a great villain unprecedented in history 1,000 years ago. He was extremely obsessed with and pursued fighting. He was a bloody existence that enveloped the entire soul society like an evil ghost. However, no matter how terrifying Hanaretsu's momentum and murderous intent were, her expression and eyes were always calm. This state is definitely not a state of being completely obsessed with fighting. If she really lost herself in fighting, how could she maintain that kind of calmness and indifference? And at this moment, is Hanaretsu really serious? Lijibao subconsciously flashed a panic in his heart, followed by a burst of anger and shame, and was frightened that he was actually intimidated by Hanaretsu's murderous intent. Don't act pretentiously here, you mere god of death. What stands before you now is His Majesty's highest masterpiece, infinitely close to the existence of God, an existence you can never touch. Under Lijibao's roar to cover up his guilty conscience, he transformed his long arms and raised them high, judgment light. In an instant, a huge spiritual particle piercing like column suddenly burst out from Lijibao's arm, completely covering Hanaretsu. Wherever this spiritual particle pierced through the light column, everything was pierced and annihilated, and even the entire outer shell of the all-conquering space was directly destroyed by half. The dazzling sunlight of the Spirit King Palace fell on Lijibao again, driving away the blood color that made Lijibao inexplicably fearful. It's over. A human smile appeared on Lijibao's inhuman head, and he subconsciously said a word. A graceful figure suddenly appeared above Lijibao, blocking the sunlight, and the shadow completely covered Lijibao's head. Hanaretsu. Lijibao's eyes trembled obviously, and he couldn't understand how Hanaretsu, who was clearly submerged by the judgment light, survived. And at this moment, the blood moon rose, completely expelling all the sunlight from Lijibao's eyes. Hanaretsu's voice, which seemed to be filled with excitement and madness, also reached Lijibao's ears at this moment. This is the sword that cuts down the gods, the end of the moon. Lijibao reacted and roared while subconsciously wanting to use judgment light again. What a joke, your blade is absolutely unreachable. Suddenly, Lijibao's voice stopped abruptly, and his eyes turned blankly, moving from Hanaretsu that originally blocked the sunlight to his forehead. Hanaretsu, whose aura was already intact seemed to have transcended time and space, and stood at Lijibao's forehead in an instant, with the blood blade completely immersed in his forehead. When? Lijibao asked subconsciously. Hanaretsu's mouth opened with an unprecedented exaggerated smile and answered. The end of the moon, naturally, when you saw that blood moon, your soul had reached the end. Lijibao understood it in an instant. Killing intent. Hanaretsu's terrifying killing intent once again caused a delay in his nerve reaction. The moment he realized the existence of the blood moon, he had actually been stabbed. However, when Lijibao was about to say something, "Your knife can't hurt," the smile on Hanaretsu's face slowly faded, and he said, "What a pity. This move not only cuts flesh with a blade, but also destroys the soul with murderous intent." Almost at the same time as Hanaretsu's voice fell, Lijibao suddenly felt a tearing pain from his soul, as if his entire soul was cut in half at this moment. Following closely, there were countless murderous intentions blowing towards his soul like steel knives. The light in Lijibao's eyes disappeared at a speed that was almost visible to the naked eye, and then the huge body quickly dissipated in the form of spirit particles. Hanaretsu, who had lost his foothold in the air, also slowly sheathed his sword, and his calm tone echoed in the space. "It's a reluctant opponent. It's a pity that the last knife was a little off and failed to cut from the temple," and the moment Hanaretsu fell to the ground, a piece of green grass exuding vitality suddenly appeared under his feet. Moreover, as Hanaretsu stepped on the green grass, he suddenly felt the endless spiritual power coming from the green grass, which quickly replenished Hanaretsu's state. Hanaretsu closed his eyes slightly and felt it, then looked towards a deserted direction in the distance by instinct, with a gentle and brilliant smile on his face. Although, in Hanaretsu's sight, Senju Cheng seemed to be fighting with Aizen Sosuk, but Hanaretsu was sure that Senju Cheng was looking at him in that direction, and was looking at him with gentle admiration. In fact, everything was just as Unohana felt instinctively. Unohana instinct directly judged the position where Senju Cheng was doubly covered by Mirror Flower Water Moon and Kido Barrier, and was aware of Senju Cheng's reaction. This made Senju Cheng couldn't help but ask Aizen Sosok beside him. Aizen-kun, how is it? It seems that Unohana-sensei's fighting instinct has grown again, and he seems to be able to see through your illusions to a certain extent. Chapter 818M Miracle. Chapter 818M Miracle. It's just that Cheng-ge's gaze is too obvious. Aizen Sosok explained in a disapproving and arrogant manner. Senju Cheng would naturally not deny this. However, this is enough to show that Unohana-retsu's fighting instinct has definitely reached a level that is unique in the world. More importantly, Unohana-retsu, who is already at the peak of the god of death, has also crossed that step and is on the verge of mastering the name. In a sense, Unohana's realm is now on par with Aizen Sosok. Moreover, if Senju Cheng's judgment is correct, once Unohana-retsu truly masters the name, it is very likely to be the name of Killing Intent. The killing intent that has been cut from the bottom to the top of the world, burying countless heroic swordsmen. It's really amazing. Senju Cheng thought sincerely in his heart. Perhaps, in terms of swordsmanship, Senju Cheng has already caught up with Unohana-retsu, but in terms of pure killing intent, Senju Cheng and even the entire Soul Society can never match Unohana-retsu. And with the release of the all-consuming space, the defeat of Legere Barrow almost triggered a chain reaction, causing the expressions of the other God's Pardon Guards members to change, revealing incredible looks. As the captain of the God's Pardon Guards, Legere Barrow may not be the strongest among all the members, but he is undoubtedly at the same level as the others. Legere Barrow's death also indirectly indicates that they may be killed. Boom. Miracle. Gerard seemed to be completely enraged, and the frequency of the bombardment between him and King Puchi's further intensified, and they even did not hesitate to exchange injuries. And Gerard's fighting style is undoubtedly in line with King Puchi's style of fighting. In an instant, large amounts of blood burst out from both sides, and both sides had completely given up defense and slashed at each other frantically, as if they were betting on who would collapse first. This scene also made Kusaka Yaoru, who was watching from afar, unconsciously clench his fists, and look at the direction of King Puchi's and Gerard nervously and hesitantly. However, when Kusaka Yaoru noticed that a large area of green grass had spread out under King Puchi's feet, his expression was obviously relaxed again. The large area of green grass continued to heal King Puchi's spirit, and the exaggerated injuries on King Puchi's face began to heal rapidly at the moment they appeared. In the end, puff. As King Puchi's gold and spiritual pressure erupted wildly, the jagged blade of his zanpakutō suddenly cut off the shield held in Gerard's left hand and passed over Gerard's neck. Hiss. As Gerard's head flew up, a large amount of blood gushed out. Seeing this scene, King Puchi's couldn't help but reveal a carefree and wanton smile on his face, and said, "Oh, that woman has already defeated her opponent. How can I lose to that woman?" At this point, King Puchi's couldn't help but cast his eyes in the direction of Unohana-retsu, with a surging fighting spirit in his eyes. Although Unohana-retsu seemed to no longer care about him, King Puchi's had not forgotten how he was defeated by Unohana-retsu 1,000 years ago. If we can fight again, then I guess. Suddenly, King Puchi's expression paused, and he looked at Gerard, who had already fallen down. Astonishing spiritual pressure erupted on Gerard's body, and King Puchi's could clearly hear the violent beating of his heart. The next moment, a queency star-shaped cross-light burst out from Gerard's body, and the head and body were instantly reconnected. Moreover, Gerard's body was still rapidly expanding, and within a moment it had reached a level even more exaggerated than that of the Black-Robed Heavenly Punishment King. On Gerard's shoulders, black lines appeared that extended to his arms, and on his lower body, opposite black and white lines appeared. A pair of angel wings grew on his back, and in his right hand he held a holy sword with a radiant hilt, and in his left hand he held a solar holy shield with spikes. From a distance, Gerard, who had risen from the ground and was half kneeling, looked like a god who had been reborn in the light. Complete holy body divine power. The next moment, Gerard opened his eyes, staring at King Puchi's who looked like an ant below, and spoke slowly. "Thank you for your efforts just now. As the ability of the Holy Word and Miracle, in order to truly activate this Holy Word ability, you must first meet the conditions that require a miracle. One of them is that the Holy Word ability will be activated automatically when you die and enter the state of the complete holy body." As Gerard spoke, he slowly stood up. His majestic and huge body was like a god descending into the Soul King Palace. and Kinpuchi Zaraka looked down at the small zanpakutō in his hand, and then looked at Gerard's astonishingly huge holy sword. His expression did not show the slightest fear. Instead, he became obviously excited, and his eyes also revealed the red light of a beast. "Don't keep yelling here. Even if I let you survive once, I will chop you to death again." The spiritual pressure on Kinpuchi Zaraka's body erupted again, but it was between the sudden force of his legs, and the whole person took the initiative to jump towards Gerard's body, holding the zanpakutō in both hands and raising it high. Just like a beast that wants to bite a god. However, Gerard's expression when looking at Kinpuchi Zaraka revealed disappointment and boredom, and more of his eyes were already cast in the direction of Unohana-retsu. At this moment, perhaps the spiritual pressure erupting from Kinpuchi Zaraka was far superior to that of an ordinary captain, but in Gerard's eyes, it was far from enough to challenge himself, who was considered the strongest. Kinpuchi Zaraka's level could only barely trigger his own miracle once, allowing Gerard to enter the perfect holy body divine power. Gerard wanted to enter this state semi-actively, and the main purpose was to get rid of Unohana-retsu and prevent Unohana-retsu from breaking into the Soul King's inner palace and interfering with His Majesty's battle. Therefore, seeing that Kinpuchi Zaraka had approached to a certain extent, a holy sword that covered the sky and the sun blocked Kinpuchi Zaraka's front, and then slashed down. Kinpuchi Zaraka also swung his sword without hesitation. Boom! The next moment, the holy sword instantly submerged Kinpuchi Zaraka's figure, and slashed into the Soul King Palace, causing a large area of collapse. As the holy sword was raised again, a gully hundreds of meters long was replaced on the ground. In the gully, Kinpuchi Zaraka fell powerlessly in it, and a large amount of blood plasma gushed out of his body as if countless bones had exploded. The zanpakutō in his hand was also broken into several pieces. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 819, The Other Shoulder. Lost. Lost again. This thought flashed through Kinpuchi Zaraka's mind, and he clearly felt the power fading from his body like a tide, and his body could no longer move. Reluctance and anger rose in Kinpuchi Zaraka's heart, and his head, which was stuck in the ravine, could hardly move. Kinpuchi Zaraka could only reluctantly turn his eyes to look at the zanpakutō that had been broken into several pieces. For the god of death, zanpakutō is the manifestation of the deepest power in the heart. The most common definition of a captain-level god of death is a god of death who has mastered Bankai. However, Kinpuchi Zaraka is a special case among the captains of all generations. He is the only one who has not mastered Bankai, and he doesn't even know the real name of zanpakutō. All along, Kinpuchi Zaraka's fighting has been completely based on spiritual pressure and instinct. He even instinctively despises the power of zanpakutō, thinking that the power of zanpakutō is too strong, which will only make it more difficult for him to find a suitable opponent to fight. However, now that he was chopped to the ground by Gerard and his bones were broken, Kinpuchi Zaraka, who was extremely unwilling, subconsciously had a desire in his heart. He longed for the power of his zanpakutō, longed for a stronger power to defeat a stronger opponent. "What is your name?" "Hey, can you hear me?" Kinpuchi Zaraka struggled to let out a low roar from his throat, as if he was questioning. This scene was seen by Yaoru Kusaka and Makoto Senju. The next moment, Yaoru Kusaka's cute figure appeared above Kinpuchi Zaraka, who was lying on his back, and bowed slightly, looking as cute and sweet as ever. "Little sword, ah? It's Yaoru." Kinpuchi Zaraka said in a daze, and inexplicably hit some kind of enlightenment in his heart. Yaoru Kusaka's smile became brighter, and then he stretched out his little hand to Kinpuchi Zaraka, who was lying on the ground, and said, "Xiaojian, if you use me well, there will be no one that Xiaojian cannot cut." Hearing this, Kinpuchi Zaraka, who had not yet recovered from his daze, subconsciously loosened his grip on the broken zanpakutō, and slowly raised his palm to hold Kusaka Yaoru's little hand. In a trance, Kinpuchi Zaraka saw a past hundreds of years ago. It was an extremely boring past, where he chopped all the enemies to pieces without feeling the slightest bit of fun in fighting, and he became more and more disgusted with his own overly powerful spiritual pressure and instincts. Instead, he felt that the world was so boring, wandering alone and aimlessly in Rukongei, and could not find any interesting fights. Then, after falling asleep unknowingly, a babbling baby girl appeared beside him. When they met in Kusaka district, he subconsciously gave each other the name Yarai. It was as if in the depths of Kinpuchi Zaraki's heart, he instinctively hoped that his zanpakutō would have the same powerful power as that woman. And now, just when Kinpuchi Zaraki was about to hold Yaoru Kusaka's hand, an arm suddenly wrapped around Yaoru Kusaka's waist and lifted Yaoru Kusaka up. For a moment, Yaoru Kusaka and Kinpuchi Zaraki looked at the pair of hands that were rapidly getting farther away, and couldn't help but be stunned. Yaoru Kusaka made a cute sound and turned his head to look at Makoto Senju, who was holding him up. Makoto Senju pointed his finger at Yaoru Kusaka and sighed softly, leaving a red mark on Yaoru Kusaka's forehead, and then spoke. Yaoru, the battlefield is so dangerous, you can't run around. Makoto Yaoru Kusaka pouted, and his two short legs made a little noise, trying to break free from Makoto Senju's arms. However, the power levels of both sides were undoubtedly not of the same order of magnitude, which also caused Yaoru Kusaka's struggle to be completely useless, and instead seemed like he was acting like a spoiled child. Until Makoto Senju slapped Yaoru Kusaka's butt hard. Suddenly, Kusaka Yaoru covered his back with his hands, stopped with a red face, and stared at Senju Makoto. Senju Makoto opened his mouth and scolded. If you don't listen, the punishment will be 1,000 times. This is a fight between adults, and it's not time for a child like you to act on your own. Kusaka Yaoru couldn't help but whispered in defense. But, I'm Shiajian. However, before Kusaka Yaoru finished speaking, Senju Makoto interrupted him directly. I know you are worried about Captain Zaraki, but I'm still here, don't worry. While Senju Makoto and Kusaka Yaoru are talking, a lot of green grass wrapped up Zaraki Kinpuchi's whole body. In less than a few breaths, Zaraki Kinpuchi had stood up again, and the bones that had been broken in large numbers on his body made a series of crackling sounds. Zaraki Kinpuchi, whose mind was gradually clearing up, looked at Kusaka Yaoru with a more meaningful look. Seeing this, Kusaka Yaoru quickly stretched out his hand to Zaraki Kinpuchi and said, Shajian, I. However, Kinpuchi Zaraki also interrupted Yaoru Kusaka, speaking impatiently. Have you forgotten? Yaoru, I've told you so many times not to interfere with my fight. Yaoru Kusaka was slightly startled, then looked at the broken zanpakutō on the ground and said, But Shiajian doesn't even have his zanpakutō now, can he still fight? Kinpuchi Zaraki's face twitched noticeably, and he spoke in a stiff tone. Even without his zanpakutō, I can still defeat my opponent. However, after Kinpuchi Zaraki said this, both Kinpuchi Zaraki and Yaoru Kusaka fell into silence. Suddenly, Makoto Senju interrupted the silence with a chuckle, attracting the attention of Kinpuchi Zaraki and Yaoru Kusaka. Makoto Senju spoke with a bit of nostalgia in his tone. Speaking of which, Captain Zaraki and Yaoru, do you still remember what happened at the graduation ceremony of the Mao Academy of Spiritual Arts? Although I rejected Captain Zaraki's invitation at the time, I have always been very grateful for Captain Zaraki and Yaoru's kindness and respect. At the time, it seemed that Captain Zaraki wanted to let me sit on the other shoulder. When he said this, even Kinpuchi Zaraki's expression was a little embarrassed. After all, how could anyone have expected that the graduate of Mao Academy of Spiritual Arts, who seemed to have only medical talents, could grow to such a terrifying height? Now, Senju Makoto mentioned this matter again, which made Kinpuchi Zaraki feel a little hot on his face. However, there was no trace of contempt in Senju Makoto's tone, but only revealed the nostalgia of reminiscence, and then he said, Then as a reward for Captain Zaraki's appreciation of me as equal to Yaoru, let me temporarily replace Yaoru and support Captain Zaraki in the battle, how about it? Chapter 820 Fangs and Teeth of the Beast. Kinpuchi Zaraki was unable to react to Makoto Senju's suggestion. Makoto Senju raised his hand, and Kinpuchi Zaraki's broken zanpakutō, which had fallen to the ground, flew into Makoto Senju's hand as if it was attracted by some invisible suction. The next moment, invisible spirit particles gathered at the broken zanpakutō, and the zanpakutō was repaired in almost the blink of an eye. A zanpakutō with a serrated blade that looked no different from the past was handed to Kinpuchi Zaraki by Makoto Senju. Kinpuchi Zaraki looked at Makoto Senju with some surprise. According to the information revealed by Makoto Senju did not have the ability to instantly repair zanpakutō. When Kinpuchi Zaraki held the zanpakutō again, he instantly noticed the difference between this zanpakutō and the past. Heavy. Extremely heavy. The tiny blade seemed to contain the weight of tens of millions of zanpakutōs, so that Kinpachi Seireitei almost couldn't hold it steady for a while, causing the zanpakutō blade to fall downwards. Unlike the normal situation, where the sharp blade of the zanpakutō easily sank into the ground, the moment this zanpakutō touched the ground, it was as if a heavy hammer fell on the ground that the ground could not bear. Boom! In an instant, the tip of the blade sank and cracked directly at the point where it touched the ground, until the veins on Kinpachi Seireitei's arm popped out, and he barely held the zanpakutō firmly. Otherwise, Kinpachi Seireitei suspected that the zanpakutō would even smash through the ground. Kinpachi Seireitei held the handle of the zanpakutō with both hands, looked at the zanpakutō in his hand, which seemed to have no difference in appearance, and asked in shock, "What's going on? Captain Zanpakutō, do you know how Namuro, who was called the god of swords in the Soul King Palace, forged his zanpakutō?" Senju Cheng asked a question. For a beast like Kinpachi Seireitei who only thought about fighting, it was naturally impossible for him to understand this question. Senju Cheng naturally did not expect Kinpachi Seireitei to answer him, so after extending the question, he answered directly. Apart from those mysterious operations, the essence is to forge a number of asoki that can reflect the heart, with asoki as the body and the heart of the sword holder as the soul, and finally form a zanpakutō. In the past, the reason why Captain Seireitei's zanpakutō did not respond to you is a very special situation, but now this zanpakutō that is returned to Captain Seireitei can be regarded as asoki in a sense. And, this asoki is given the absolute quality in the world by me. No matter how Captain Seireitei wants to present his heart, it can definitely meet Captain Seireitei's needs. When Kinpachi Seireitei heard the last part, he grinned and asked, "So, what you mean is that this asoki will respond to my heart and form a brand new zanpakutō that completely fits my heart, right? You can understand it that way." Makoto Senju said with a smile. In fact, Makoto Senju had performed this operation on Ichigo Kurosaki before. The only difference is that the various powers in Kurosaki Ichigo's body are mixed, so Senju Makoto forcibly guided out all the powers that were gradually balanced in Kurosaki Ichigo's body, and finally formed the current double-bladed moon. However, Kinpachi Seireitei didn't need to be so troublesome. In the past, this beast automatically blocked its sharp teeth and fangs, and actively suppressed its fighting instinct. But now, for this beast, it will naturally polish its new fangs or teeth, and the beast will naturally polish its weapons to the best state. I am very satisfied. After Kinpachi Seireitei said this, when he was about to turn around and leave, his body paused, and added another sentence, saying, "The power of the past may not be suitable for me. This kind of power that I have repolished in battle will be more suitable for me to fight happily." After that, Kinpachi Seireitei tore off the captain's Aorian death suit that were already tattered and soaked with blood, completely exposing his upper body covered with various scars. Then, Kinpachi Seireitei held his zanpakutō in both hands, and rushed towards Gerard, who was walking away with his back to him, like a wild beast that had completely released itself. The second round begins. With Kinpachi Seireitei's passionate and crazy voice, the terrifying gold and spiritual pressure burst out from Kinpachi Seireitei's body again, and formed a shape like a materialized skull, and then mattly poured into the jagged zanpakutō in Kinpachi Seireitei's hand. Seeing Kinpachi Seireitei's back in the distance, Kusakayaru's little hand unconsciously grasped Senju Makoto's death suit, and asked subconsciously, "Makoto, will Xiaojian win?" "Don't worry, Captain Seireitei has a fighting instinct that even Unohana teacher admires." Senju Makoto replied with a smile. Kusakayaru responded softly, and then said another sentence. "Thank you, Makoto." "When did you find out?" "What did you find out?" Makoto Senju asked as if he didn't understand, and then he put his palm on Kusakayaru's head and said, "Did you find out that Kusakayaru is a cute little fool?" As for this question, I knew it from the beginning. The so-called from the beginning is naturally not the first time I saw Kusakayaru. A few days ago, when Makoto Senju personally performed the spiritual superposition operation on all the captains and vice-captains, he was shocked to find that Kusakayaru's zanpakutō was herself. According to common sense, this kind of thing is impossible. The only possibility is that Kusakayaru itself is a materialized zanpakutō. However, unlike the zanpakutō materialized by Muramasa, Kusakayaru's materialization method is more advanced and perfect. From the appearance, spiritual pressure, and spirit body, there is almost no difference from the normal Shinigami. However, even if he found the specialness of Kusakayaru, Makoto Senju did not deliberately reveal it, and did not take any measures to deal with it. Until he saw Kusaka Yairai's behavior just now, he realized that in order for King Puchizaraka to recover the power of his zanpakutō that he had abandoned, he might choose to dematerialize and return to the form of his zanpakutō. Makoto Senju chose to stop him, not only because he was worried that after Kusaka Yairai dematerialized, he would not be able to live in Soul Society in a materialized form again. More importantly, for King Puchizaraka, who was once extremely crazy, the power of his zanpakutō generated during that crazy and cold-blooded period may not be fully mature and suitable for King Puchizaraka now. Therefore, it is undoubtedly more appropriate to let King Puchizaraka use a method similar to Ichigo Kurosaki to hone claws that are more suitable for him in battle. Chapter 821 The world will be ours. Kusaka Yaru, who was held in the arms of Senju Makoto, also felt a sense of relief at this moment, even though Kusaka Yaru did not resist turning into a zanpakutō again, and staying in the spiritual space of King Puchizaraka to accompany King Puchizaraka to fight one enemy after another. However, after Kusaka Yaru experienced the life of Soul Society firsthand, he couldn't help but feel sad when he thought about saying goodbye to those delicious snacks and never seeing many important friends again. It seems that it's not necessary now. Thinking of this, Kusaka Yaru's face, which was a little tense and sad, showed a relaxed smile. Suddenly, Kusaka Yaru thought of something and looked at Senju Makoto and asked, "Hey, Makoto, didn't you fight with Aizen just now? Did you win?" When he said this, Kusaka Yaru subconsciously looked in the direction where Senju Makoto was fighting. However, the corpse of Aizen Sasuke, as expected by Kusaka Yaru, did not lie on the ground obediently, but disappeared. "We didn't win, but Aizen Sasuke escaped to who knows where, and I was anxious to treat Captain Zaraki, so I couldn't stop him in time." After a pause, Senju Makoto lifted Kusaka Yaru in his arms and put him on the ground, then spoke. "But it doesn't matter, even if we can't kill Aizen for a while, it doesn't matter, the important thing is that we save Captain Zaraki and protected Yaru, right?" Hearing this, Kusaka Yaru looked at Senju Makoto with a moved face, then took out a candy wrapped in a handkerchief from his arms and handed it to Senju Makoto, saying, "Thank you, Makoto. This is the confito I wanted to save for one last taste. Please have some." "Okay." Makoto Senju wanted to take the gift from Kusaka Yaru, but when he saw Kusaka Yaru blinking at him, he immediately understood what Kusaka Yaru meant. Immediately, Makoto Senju bowed slightly, and then opened his mouth slightly in front of Kusaka Yaru. Kusaka Yaru's smile became brighter and brighter. He took out the confito from the handkerchief and gently put it into Makoto Senju's mouth, and asked, "Is it sweet?" "It's delicious." Makoto Senju felt the sweetness in his mouth and said, "Thank you for the confito, Yaru. When we return to the Seireitei, I will also treat you to confito." Kusaka Yaru's eyes lit up and he said hurriedly, "It's a deal, Makoto." Makoto Senju couldn't help but touch Kusaka Yaru's pink hair again and said, "No problem, but before that, don't rush to the battlefield. Just watch from a distance." "Yes, Makoto." After getting Kusaka Yairai's assurance, Senju Makoto watched Kusaka Yairai retrieve to a safer distance consciously, and couldn't help showing a doting smile on his face, as if he was treating his daughter. However, Senju Makoto inexplicably felt that Aizen Sasuke standing next to him seemed to have a strange look of jealousy, and said something. "Makoto-kun seems to have no resistance to people named Yairai. Don't Aizen-kun think this name is quite nice?" Senju Makoto asked back. "Not bad." Aizen Sasuke responded perfunctorily, then turned his eyes and looked at the movement coming from the Soul King's palace, and said, "It seems to be about the same." Upon hearing this, Senju Makoto instantly put away his original smile and said with a serious face, "Then I'll leave it to you, Aizen-kun." Aizen Sasuke did not speak, but disappeared from the spot in a flash, heading towards the Soul King's palace. At this moment, the Soul King's palace was completely covered by a layer of black, completely isolating the spirit particles inside and outside. Therefore, whether it was Senju Makoto or Zaraki Futatsuya, they had no way to confirm the information in the Soul King's palace through that layer of black. Senju Makoto knew very well that it was Hyoshogu Ichibei who was guarding against the controller of the name of the spirit particle. Although Hyoshogu Ichibei could not confirm who was the second person in the world who completely controlled the name, Hyoshogu Ichibei must be aware that the controller of the name of the spirit particle could not fail to notice the anomaly in the Soul King's palace. Therefore, the layer of black that Hyoshogu Ichibei covered the Soul King's palace seemed to be for dealing with Ithwatch, but it was actually for the controller of the name of the spirit particle. This also indirectly shows that Hyoshogu Ichibei still has spare energy to deal with Ithwatch, but according to the prophecy evoked to the Holy Emperor, Hyoshogu Ichibei will definitely lose. At this moment, the only person who can replace Senju Makotao as a pair of eyes to observe the situation is Aizen Sussex Mirror Flower and Water Moon, who can hide Hyoshogu Ichibei and Ithwatch from sneaking into it. If Senju Makotao is not wrong, then it is undoubtedly the keynote that determines the future direction of the entire world, and when to intervene at the critical moment, when is the most appropriate time to take action. This can only be entrusted to Aizen Sussex to judge. In a sense, at this moment, Senju Makotao has entrusted his fate to Aizen Sussex to a certain extent. Aizen-kun, you won't betray me, right? Senju Makotao thought silently, watching Aizen Sussex figure begin to step into the black lair outside the Soul King's inner palace. Aizen Sussex, who seemed to have sensed something, turned his head slightly to look at Senju Makotao before he was about to be completely swallowed by the black lair, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. Makotao, the world is mine and yours, and it will definitely be ours in the end. No one else has the right to get involved. Finally, until Senju Makotao completely confirmed that Aizen Sussex had entered the Soul King's palace, he completely retracted his gaze and put it on the battle that was still going on. Before receiving Aizen's signal, let's deal with these tricky guys first. The closest to Senju Makotao is undoubtedly the second round of battle between Kinpuchi Zaraki and Gerard. Kinpuchi Zaraki, a bloody beast, never knew what fear and retreat were. Facing Gerard, who was almost like a god, he faced him head-on as always. Where are you going? Our fight is far from over. Gerard was stunned. The huge body turned around, and he found that Kinpuchi Zaraki, who should have died in that blow, appeared again. And then, Gerard raised the huge holy sword in his hand again and slashed at Kinpuchi Zaraki. The spiritual pressure that burst out of Kinpuchi Zaraki's body almost rushed up to the sky in the direction of the burst, and then madly injected into the zanpakutō in his hand. Come on. Chapter 822. Zaraki's zanpakutō. Boom. Another blow from the holy sword seemed to shatter the ground of the Soul King Palace, and Kinpuchi Zaraki's figure was submerged again in an instant. Then, the holy sword slashed heavily on the ground, causing the entire Soul King Palace to shake. However, when Gerard saw that there was a slight gap between the holy sword and the ground, and the holy sword did not completely fall on the ground, his expression could not help but be stunned. The next moment, Gerard actually felt that the holy sword in his hand was slightly raised. What? In Gerard's surprised eyes, Kinpuchi Zaraki, whose half of his body was completely sunk into the ground, held up his zanpakutō with both hands, and stood up little by little with the huge holy sword. Blood continued to spurt out of Kinpuchi Zaraki's body, and from time to time, the sound of bones creaking under the heavy load could be heard in his body. However, as green grass grew from the ground and came into contact with Kinpuchi Zaraki, the injuries of Kinpuchi Zaraki's spirit body were healing rapidly, and he seemed to stand up little by little while keeping the posture of holding the sword with both hands. Feeling the holy sword being lifted up little by little, Gerard's expression flashed with anger, and his other hand also pressed on the holy sword, and the terrifying power that seemed like an incredible miracle suddenly erupted. In an instant, blood could not stop seeping from the pores of Kinpuchi Zaraki's body. The unimaginable pressure was transmitted from the arms holding the sword to every corner of the body, and the sound of broken bones was like firecrackers. If it weren't for Senju Makotao's incomparable familiarity with the structure of Kinpuchi Zaraki's spirit body and being able to maintain high-speed treatment for Kinpuchi Zaraki without interruption, I'm afraid Kinpuchi Zaraki's body would completely collapse in a moment. But even so, his body continued to collapse under the terrifying pressure and was quickly repaired by treatment. Despite the unimaginable pain, Kinpuchi Zaraki still had no intention of retreating. On the contrary, Kinpuchi Zaraki grinned, with an excited smile on his face. That's right, that's it. Only in this way can I have the impulse and value to kill him at all costs. Hearing this kind of words that he was treated as prey, Gerard's expression could not help but show a trace of impatience, and he shouted, "Looking for death." The next moment, the power applied to the holy sword became more and more terrifying, and even the ground under Gerard's feet began to crack due to the explosion of power. The already terrifying pressure on Kinpuchi Zaraki's head was once again intensified to an unimaginable degree. The gold and spiritual pressure on Kinpuchi Zaraki's body burst out more and more, rushing madly towards the zanpakutō in his hand. This scene was also seen by Kusaka Yaoru, who was watching the battle from afar. Suddenly, Kusaka Yaoru seemed to have a feeling in his heart, and he picked up the zanpakutō on his waist and raised it in the direction of Kinpuchi Zaraki. Without waiting for Kusakayaru to do anything, Kusakayaru's zanpakutō turned into spirit particles and disappeared in Kusakayaru's hands. At this moment, Kinpachi Zaraki felt a certain rhythm. Under the extreme pressure and the desire to fight, the new zanpakutō that was born would undoubtedly be the most suitable for Kinpachi Zaraki at this moment. As for the name of the zanpakutō, this thought flashed through Kinpachi Zaraki's mind, and then he laughed wildly. The claws of the beast do not need to be given a name. The next moment, an astonishing roar echoed in the Soul King Palace. Then, the huge holy sword was suddenly cut in two. Before Gerard could react to this astonishing fact, Kinpachi Zaraki, whose image had changed greatly, rushed out from the rising smoke. At this moment, Kinpachi Zaraki's black hair, which was already standing up, was extended again, almost to the heels. His skin was glowing with a bloody color, and his ferocious facial features seemed to become more angular. Moreover, the gold and spiritual pressure that had originally soared into the sky was now completely gathered within a few inches of Kinpachi Zaraki, as if forming an invisible barrier to protect Kinpachi Zaraki. Compared with Kinpachi Zaraki's greatly changed body, the zanpakutō held by Kinpachi Zaraki did not change too obviously, but only became longer, and the jagged blade became more and more ferocious. Kill me, Gerald. Before Gerald could fully see the changes of Kinpachi Zaraki in this form seemed to have a terrifying high-speed movement ability, and the blood-colored figure wrapped in the gold and spiritual pressure crossed with Gerald's huge body. Then, Gerald felt a severe pain. Puchi. An exaggerated and astonishingly huge wound appeared on Gerald's chest, and a large amount of blood like a bloody rain could not stop gushing out of the wound. Damn you, God of Death, you dare to offend the body of God. With Gerard's roar, the broken holy sword came out again, and Gerard threw it towards Kinpachi Zaraki behind him. Facing the holy sword that seemed to be able to create the world, the gold and spiritual pressure on Kinpachi Zaraki's body became more and more intense, but he took the initiative to rush towards the holy sword. Boom! This attack was like an ant crashing into the holy sword of creation. However, with a loud bang, the holy sword stopped in mid-air and stopped in front of the zanpakutō held in Kinpachi Zaraki's hands. How is it possible? Why does a mere god of death have power comparable to mine? Gerard said in disbelief. Is that all? Don't make me feel bored. Oh, I will kill you. Kinpachi Zaraki was laughing wildly, provoking, roaring, and jumping for joy. The next moment, Kinpachi Zaraki stepped on the holy sword that was like an 8-lane road for a normal Shinigami, and turned into a shadow and rushed towards Gerard, leaving another huge wound on Gerard's body. And until this moment, Gerard finally realized that Kinpachi Zaraki's power at this moment was completely different from before. Don't get too proud of yourself. I'm a miracle that can surpass everything. The light of the cross of extinction in Gerard's body shone again, and when the terrifying spiritual pressure burst out, he completely ignored the injuries on his body and fought with Kinpachi Zaraki. For a moment, although Kinpachi Zaraki and Gerard were obviously different in size, they were fighting fiercely. On the contrary, Makoto Senju, who was watching from the sidelines, had a slightly strange expression. Kinpachi Zaraki's zanpakutō was modified by Makoto Senju, so he naturally would not forget to leave some backdoors in it. But because of this, Makoto Senju somewhat, I don't know how to describe it. Chapter 823 The Immortal Evil Ghost. Maybe it was because of Kusakayaru, or maybe it was the influence of Kinpachi Zaraki himself. The zanpakutō that Kinpachi Zaraki has now not only has no name, but also has no difference between Shikai and Bankai. Even the conditions for releasing zanpakutō are not active, but rather passive release abilities similar to Gerald's Holy Text and Miracle. However, Gerald's Holy Text ability and Miracle completely releases the perfect holy body state when it is fatally injured, while the conditions for releasing zanpakutō by Kinpachi Zaraki are to accumulate enough damage in battle and to raise the fighting spirit to a certain limit. As for the ability to release zanpakutō, it is indestructible. After releasing zanpakutō, Kinpachi Zaraki will force his spirit to enter a special stage. In addition to his own strength, speed, and spiritual pressure will continue to increase according to the strength of his fighting spirit. As long as Kinpachi Zaraki's fighting spirit is not completely extinguished, his spirit will always maintain this optimal fighting state. That is to say, unless Kinpachi Zaraki is crushed to the point of despair by a completely irresistible force, he will be a beast that fights to no end. Under the gaze of Makoto Senju, Kinpachi Zaraki and Gerard kept colliding, and his red body unconsciously expanded by several circles, and the power, speed, and spiritual pressure that burst out completely crushed the past state. At this moment, it is not even appropriate to call Kinpachi Zaraki a beast. Instead, he is more like an evil ghost who greedily enjoys fighting. The stronger the opponent, the higher Kinpachi Zaraki's fighting spirit, and the stronger the increase he gets. However, there is undoubtedly an upper limit to all abilities. Now the fight between Kinpachi Zaraki and Gerard is undoubtedly to see who can hold on to the end between fighting spirit and miracle. And if Kinpachi Zaraki awakens a new zanpakutō ability, Makoto Senju no longer needs to provide treatment for Kinpachi Zaraki. As long as Kinpachi Zaraki is not completely defeated, his spirit will maintain this optimal fighting state. Then, Makoto Senju turned his eyes to the battles between D-Lethal Dose Yaskin and Mayuri Kurosaki, and Haskvald and Ichigo Kurosaki. The battle between Yaskin and Mayuri Kurosaki was full of strange meanings. What they competed with was neither spiritual pressure nor fighting skills, but various toxins targeting the body. In this kind of battle, Makoto Senju could not tell who had the upper hand. However, Mayuri Kurosaki also had puppets made by 3 members of the Holy Cross Knights, and with the Bankai Golden Hija Shojutsu Demon Embryo Fine Syndrome body, it seemed that there was still some strength left. This made Makoto Senju, who already valued Mayuri Kurosaki, look at him with new eyes again, and he had no intention of intervening. As for the battle between Haskvald and Ichigo Kurosaki, Makoto Senju frowned slightly, and a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. At this moment, Ichigo Kurosaki is undoubtedly very strong. Just the double sword Zanjutsu in the state of Shikai have shown a combat power far beyond the past Bankai and Hollowed. But even so, Haskvald still showed that he had a lot of strength to spare, and he was in a state of delaying time. Haskvald's position may be a little different from what I expected. After this thought flashed through Senju Makoto's mind, he finally turned his attention to Shiwuen Yorishi and Sea Enforcement Penida, who had been chasing all the way and had already reached the most remote palace in the Soul King Palace. At the beginning, Shiwuen Yorishi's speed was far faster than Penida. Even though Shiwuen Yorishi could not defeat Penida, she kept teasing and restraining Penida throughout the whole process, angering Penida and moving away from the main battlefield area. However, as time changed, Penida's own speed showed a linear continuous improvement, until now it has reached the level of being on par with Shiwuen Yorishi, who was going all out. Although the facts are a bit outrageous, Penida, who obviously only has one arm, has gradually acquired a speed comparable to the god of flash Shifunen Yorishi. In the case of a speed disadvantage, Shifunen Yorishi's situation almost instantly became dangerous. For this reason, Zaraki Futeya, who has already merged a considerable part of the spirit particles, had to help Shifunen Yorishi to contain Penida. But even with the support of Zaraki Futeya, when Senju Makoto arrived near the battlefield, Penida, who was originally suppressed by Shifunen Yorishi and Zaraki Futeya, unexpectedly reversed and suppressed Shifunen Yorishi and Zaraki Futeya again. The battlefield looked a bit ridiculous and weird from a distance. An arm turned into a residual image on the battlefield and kept flashing, and nerves stretched out from the arm, controlling all the visible and invisible objects touched by the nerves. At this moment, not only was Shifunen Yorishi's speed restricted, but even Zaraki Futeya, whose ability was quite unsolvable, was also miserable. The ability of Futeya Zaraki, Spirit Phantom, can integrate his soul and consciousness into countless spirit particles, and freely manipulate the fused spirit particles, and manipulate countless spirit particles as if they were his body. However, when the spirit particles fused by Futeya Zaraki touch the nerves released to the outside world by Penida, the control of that part of the spirit particles will be instantly taken away, and even Futeya Zaraki himself will be injured. In the continuous battle with Yorishi Shiwuen, Penida, who seemed to be unable to speak clearly, seemed to have evolved even the language function, and spoke in a tone that was quite similar to Yorishi Shiwuen's unique bad taste. Keep running, or if I catch you, I will break your limbs bit by bit, and then dismember your body that is struggling to death in pain and roll it into a ball. However, at this moment, Yorishi Shifunen, who had already released the instant raw hollow thunder god battle form, was already close to a state of exhaustion. She relied entirely on her last bit of willpower to maintain a high degree of concentration and constantly dodge the attacks of Penida, whose speed was already a little faster than hers. As for counterattack, Yorishi Shifunen's now empty left arm, but it tells the consequences of this rash contact with Penida. As Penida's speed became faster and faster, Yorishi Shifunen could no longer avoid the counterattack from the nerves at the moment of attacking Penida. At that moment, if Yorishi Shifunen had not decisively abandoned her left arm, I'm afraid that the whole person would be completely manipulated by Penida's nerves and twisted into a ball. Seeing that Seireitei was also trying his best to contain Penida, Shifu Yorishi's figure turned into lightning and continued to retreat, trying to keep a safer distance to contain Penida. Shifu Yorishi's left leg ankle, which had unknowingly reached its limit, suddenly made a crisp sound, causing the reaction to be slow. Oh no. Shifu Yorishi was suddenly startled, and her body, which was moving at a high speed, was unbalanced and there was no time to remedy it. Chapter 824 The Spirit King's left arm. However, just when Yorishi lost her balance and was about to fall heavily to the ground, she did not feel the fallen feeling she expected. Instead, she felt a strong arm wrapped around her waist from bottom to top. Master! Yorishi reacted instantly and looked up. What came into her eyes was the gentle and handsome face of Makoto Senju. At this moment, Makoto Senju was holding Yorishi with one hand and raising his other hand towards the back of Yorishi. Large tracts of huge trees burst out and rushed towards Penida like raging waves. Boom! Speed can be transformed into power. This also caused Penida to smash into the large tracts of huge trees almost instantly like a drill. However, the impact force brought by Penida's own inertia was completely consumed after advancing less than 10 meters, and then countless giant trees continued to completely submerge Penida and the large number of dead things it controlled. From a distance, it seemed as if an endless sea of woods had been raised on the ground around Senju Makoto, completely submerging Penida, who wanted to go against the trend. And under Senju Makoto's feet, several giant trees also rose up, carrying Senju Makoto and Shifu Yorishi to the ground completely submerged by giant trees. It was not until this time that Senju Makoto's arm slightly used force to straighten Shifu Yorishi's fallen body, and suddenly noticed Shifu Yorishi's missing left arm, and his face obviously sank slightly. Although the relationship between Senju Makoto and Shifu Yorishi can be said to be extremely complicated, mixed with subordinates, pets, friends and other relationships, this does not mean that Senju Makoto does not value Shifu Yorishi. Penida was injured. Senju Makoto asked softly. Shifu Yorishi, who had always maintained a calm and sharp look in the face of life and death, softened her eyes instantly, and even showed a few crystals, and spoke miserably. Master, it was that monster that forcibly twisted my arm and I almost couldn't see you. At this moment, Shifu Yorishi was just like a cat that was bullied outside and complained to its master. This scene made the face of Seireitei, who appeared behind Senju Makoto in the form of a physical form, look a little weird. In the previous battle with Penida, Shifu Yorishi relied on the amazing speed and power brought by Instant Boom to repeatedly injure Penida. When Penida's speed obviously evolved, showing a weird nerve, and Penida also had an incredible regeneration ability, Shifu Yorishi realized that her ability did not have the possibility of killing Penida. Yorishi continued to tease Penida with unmatched speed, making Penida so angry that her palms were almost smoking. It was not until Penida's speed evolved to a level comparable to that of Yorishi that Yorishi began to fall into an embarrassing situation and was chased away by the furious Penida. According to the rather straightforward thinking of Furuya, it should be Penida who was really wronged. Yorishi was teasing Penida all the way until she got out of control. However, Furuya did not meddle in other people's business to expose Yorishi's character, but calmly stated it. Master Senju, Penida's true form is the left arm of the Soul King that was endowed with the power of the Holy Word by Furuya. In addition to the nerves released outside the body that can control all visible and invisible things it touches, it also has incredible evolution and regeneration abilities. Originally, Penida's movements were quite slow, but through continuous battles with Captain Shifu, it has now reached a level comparable to Captain Shifu. Senju Makoto nodded, then looked at Shifu Yorishi's missing arm, and spoke with a trace of pity in his eyes. Thank you for your hard work. Let me deal with Penida myself from now on. At this time, a whirlpool seemed to appear in the sea of wood that had originally submerged Penida. Large tracts of giant trees were moved away by Penida's nerves, and Penida's palm-like appearance slowly rose from the large tracts of giant trees. However, even though Senju Makoto appeared in front of him, Penida seemed to still keep his invisible eyes fixed on Shifu Yorishi, and said in an angry voice, "Hand over that woman." Facing Penida's threat, Shifu Yorishi, who had originally looked pitiful to Senju Makoto, turned his head and showed a mean and mocking expression to Penida. Then, Shifu Yorishi's clothes slipped off, and the whole person instantly turned into a black cat, skillfully nestling on Senju Makoto's shoulder, looking like a weak kitten who was exhausted and unable to move, and said, "Penida, I will stay here and not move. If you have the guts, kill me." Penida. It is hard to imagine that Senju Cheng felt extreme anger from a palm with 5 fingers constantly twisting, and there were blood vessels constantly throbbing on the surface of Penida. "I kill you." Penida roared angrily, and his entire palm swept towards Senju Cheng at a terrifying speed. In response, Zarakisu, who was standing behind Senju Cheng, couldn't help but speak out. "Master Senju, be careful not to be touched by the nerves that penetrates out of the body. Even the spirit particles can be controlled by the other party. Don't worry." As Senju Cheng's voice fell, a pair of wooden giant palms 10 times larger than Penida suddenly formed in the wood sea below, and they slammed together with Penida as the center. Pa! A loud slapping sound echoed in the Spirit King Palace. Penida's body, which was a giant palm as tall as 3 people, was instantly slapped into a meat paste like a mosquito. However, Senju Cheng frowned slightly. Penida's spiritual pressure did not disappear, but continued to increase. The next moment, Senju Cheng clearly felt that he had lost control of the pair of wooden giant palms that had been closed in front of him, and the pair of wooden giant palms slowly opened on their own, revealing Penida, whose body was a little tattered but had a lot of nerves connected to the wooden giant palms. Penida's body was still recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Senju Cheng, do you want to stop me too? I want you to die too." Penida's angry voice rang out at the same time, and the pair of wooden giant palms, under Penida's control, broke away from the wooden sea below, and slapped Senju Cheng from the left and right. Obviously, Penida wanted to retaliate against Senju Cheng in the same way. Chapter 825 Put your hands together. However, under Penida's gaze, facing this amazing blow, the black cat Yorishi lying on Senju Cheng's shoulder did not react with the slightest panic or fear. On the contrary, the black cat Yorishi raised his only remaining right paw and licked it lazily, as if he was preparing to spend a leisurely afternoon. He looked at Penida with his cat eyes slightly narrowed, as if he was watching an impromptu clown. That was a look full of sympathy, mockery and pity. This look also further intensified Penida's anger. However, just when the pair of wooden giant palms were about to hit Senju Cheng, Penida suddenly felt that he was shrouded in an inexplicable shadow. When he subconsciously looked up, he saw a pair of wooden giant palms that were 10 times larger than before closing rapidly. Boom! The vibration sound of the closing palms this time was even more amazing. The aftermath alone directly set off an amazing storm within the entire Spirit King Palace. Penida and the wooden giant palm controlled by a large number of nerves were once again slapped in the center like a mosquito. The strong wind swept the mat, blowing Kuronko Yorishi's smooth hair completely backwards. Even when Kuronko Yorishi was missing a claw, Kuronko Yorishi was blown off balance and fell backwards. Senju Cheng raised his palm to block Kuronko Yorishi in front of him, blocking the storm for Kuronko Yorishi. Now at this moment, Kuronko Yorishi could speak human language, but he still subconsciously made a lazy meow to compliment his master. Even though Kuronko Yorishi had completely bet on Senju Cheng to defeat Hyoshogu Ichiba and become the next person who truly controls the world. However, Kuronko Yorishi couldn't help but waver when he saw the amazing power that seemed to be manipulated at will in a thought. In addition to Kuronko Yorishi, the only person who truly understood the power contained in this attack was Zarakisu. As a type who manipulates spirit particles to fight, Zarakisu also knows that even if he tries his best, he can't copy Senju Cheng's attack. Even though Zarakisu seems to be able to manipulate the fused spirit particles at will, the quality, strength, quantity and other aspects of the things composed of spirit particles all depend on the ability of the operator. For example, all queens are races that can manipulate spirit particles to fight, but don't they want to compress 10 or even 100 times the spirit particles for each sacred extinction arrow they release? No, they want to, but they simply can't do it. Zarakisu is the same. And this time, although Penida's spiritual pressure still did not disappear, and even continued to rise, the wooden giant palm, which increased more than 10 times in quality and quantity this time, did not take the initiative to open. In the end, it was Senju Cheng who took the initiative to control the wooden giant palm to open it. The picture that appeared in front of Senju Cheng, the wooden giant palm controlled by Penida and the nerves it released, was like a blood-red pearl after the clam was opened. Penida's body was obviously more disfigured, but in this situation, Penida's entire body seemed to have evolved into more nerves that were frantically extending outward, trying to control more mass. In Penida's bloody body, Senju Cheng could vaguely feel the anger from Penida that was still rising, the anger of defeating Senju Cheng and Shibuya Yorishi at all costs. Sure enough, it is worthy of being the Spirit King's left arm in the records that controls advancement. Senju Makotao suddenly sighed, which made Kuronko Yorishi look at Senju Makotao in surprise and asked, Does even the master find it difficult? Senju Makotao shook his head and said, No, if it is just an am, it really shouldn't be expected to have much brain capacity. Instead, it is more like a puppet and weapon implanted with some thoughts by youth watch. Shuin Yorishi heard this and looked at Penida, who was bloody and fleshy, but was frantically evolving nerves to try to control more matter, and suddenly understood what Senju Makotao meant. If one thinks normally, then under the overwhelming force of Makotao Senju, even if Penida has the ability to evolve continuously under the force of advance, he should choose to evolve the already terrifying speed. Only in this way can Penida rely on extreme speed to deal with Makotao Senju's exaggerated attack. However, Penida seems to have only a very fixed thinking mode. When Penida was injured by the wooden giant palm, Penida actually gave up speed and began to evolve madly to derive more nerves to manipulate more things, trying to fight back against Makotao Senju with the wooden giant palm. The brain is a good thing, but if it's just the left arm, it seems that there is no such thing. In the end, it's just a puppet that evolves and acts continuously based on instinct. Makotao Senju said, and his eyes looking at Penida couldn't help but have a little more pity. Under the gaze of Makotao Senju and Yorishi Shifen Yuan, Penida's nerves were growing wildly at an extremely rapid speed. From a distance, it looked as if a large and dense spider web was extending from the blood pearl in the clam, until the entire clam was completely filled. This scene was enough to make people with trypophobia shudder. As the nerves derived from Penida grew to this extent, the pair of huge wooden palms also fell into Penida's control. At this moment, Penida, whose body shape had been distorted to the point that he could hardly maintain his bloody palms, made a somewhat incoherent sound. Penida, Death God. Die. Evolve to, Advance to, Penida, and the exaggerated wooden palm also changed direction under Penida's control and began to close in the direction of Senju Makotao. Facing this scene, Senju Makotao hugged the black cat Yorishi who was lying on his shoulder, habitually touched the black cat Yorishi's smooth back to the tail, and said something. Don't overestimate your own abilities. The next moment, a pair of wooden giant palms that occupied almost 1/5 of the space of the Soul King Palace appeared out of thin air, and suddenly closed Penida and the palace below that belonged to Shotara Senjumara in the middle. Bang! The dull thunder-like sound of the palms closing even faintly reached the Soul Society below, which was isolated by the 72 ghost barriers. So much so that even though it was a sunny day in the Soul Society, many Shinigami and Rukongeda residents subconsciously looked up at the clear sky, wondering where the muffled thunder sounded. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.